heavily. So hopefully that'll be something that candidates can stand up for if elected in Chilliwack, and go to Victoria and say, hey, these are the things we need.
Yeah, and from the incumbents, I'd like to hear what they've done for us. I'd like for them to sit in front of the camera, look at it, and say, in the last years in my seat, this is what I have accomplished for my riding. And I don't think I've quite heard that clearly yet.
Well, I think I've had the opportunity to interview a number of candidates, including both incumbents, and I did ask that question. Well, I asked it in a slightly different way. I said, what are the things that you're the most proud of? When you come back to the riding, what can you look at and say, you know, these are things that I accomplished? And one of the candidates, John Martin, said that what gave him the most pride in the work that he did was working with people in the community and solving problems of people that come to the office. And he said it's one of the things that gave him the most pleasure. And Laurie Thronis pointed to a few of the projects that had been accomplished. The Vetter Bridge, the Lickman Overpass, things like that they're pointing to. But I think I join with a number of people in the community, and yourself included, to say, you know, one of the benefits of having a stable riding politically is that, you know, those people are always there and they're going to work for you. One of the downsides of having that kind of political stability is when you're not a riding that's in play for the government, you can be ignored pretty easily. And I would say this one aspect of having a very uncertain election coming up is the fact that perhaps in the future the riding, it will be difficult to ignore the riding because it's kind of moved into a category where it's uncertain what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, for, Laurie Thronis, it wasn't the party in power, but for Mr. Martin, it was. But tell me about the Trans-Canada Highway. Where's Chilliwack in the schedule? How many long weekends do we have to sit in traffic for 2 hours waiting for it to come through here? The twinning of the highway, where is it going to stop? I've heard so many stories, can't get a straight answer from that. Frustrating. In a recent discussion with the infrastructure minister for nationally, federally, that question was asked of him. And his response was simple. I got lots of money. All the province has to do is to come up with their share and we'll get it done. We'll see.
So it's going to be an interesting night, and it's going to chart what I think will be a very interesting future for the community. I hope we'll have some results to talk about on Saturday night, but there was an overwhelming number of votes that were cast by mail, so we may not have those counted right away. Hopefully we'll get some trends that we can talk about, and hopefully we can continue this discussion as we watch results to come in on that night. Just remind folks, we're going to be joined on that evening by Scott Fast, who's a professor emeritus from the University of Fraser Valley. And people in this part of the world know Scott as one of the most knowledgeable people about local government politics and provincial politics, so it'll be interesting to hear his insight. We're also going to have Don Lane on with hourly or half-hourly updates on what's happening. We're going to have special guests. We have Willow Richelt, who is a current member of the Chilliwack School Board. John Less, a former mayor, former MLA, who's always got lots of great opinions that we can listen to. And who am I missing? Kelly Valonis, who was, of course, a federal Liberal candidate for this riding, and again, a person who's very plugged into politics and certainly have a lot of good insight for us. So I hope that you'll join Bud and I and all of those guests on Saturday night, October 24th. We're going to be on the air at 7:30. Do a little preamble, go over some of the things that have occurred this week and make sure we've got everything tied up and ready to go. And then at 8 o'clock, hopefully we'll be getting results in. We'll have guests, and we hope that you'll enjoy watching on October 24th. Thanks so much for now. On behalf of chillTV and all of our great sponsors, we hope you'll tune in then.
But it never seems to come. Come on, let's go check one out today. There it is. We have the location for the Olive Junction right on the corner of Keith Wilson and Better Road in Garrison Village. Let's go. All right, we've arrived at the Olive Junction. Here we are in lovely Garrison. Come on in, let's see what's in here. I mean, look at the selection in here. It's like incredible. Look at all these vinegars and oils. It's like, wow, I am overwhelmed at this. Samantha and Curtis, tell us why you do this and how long have you been here? Give us a little bit of your story.
Well, we've been in Garrison Village since December 2018, but this journey actually began about 10 years ago to a trip that I made down in Fairfield, Bellingham. And that was my first oil and vinegar experience. And it just catapulted us into what is possible with food and what's possible with oil and vinegar.
You're not just oils, you're not just vinegars. Tell me more. What's going on here?
We actually have our own artisan foods line, and it's our own private label. So a lot of this stuff is actually small batch, local harvest.
I did see on the counter espresso flavored balsamic vinegar. Wow! Like what? Can I get a buzz off that?
I think you can actually. Yes. No. It's a great balsamic vinegar. My wife actually uses it in chili. It's great from cheesecake to chili.
Yeah, so actually because it's seasonal, I figured we'd hook you up with one of our top sellers right now, which is our toasted coconut balsamic vinegar, and paired it with our California lime olive oil. So we put the lime in the coconut for you.
Let's see. Wow. Wow. This is good.
Yes.
Wow. It's like drinking concentrated wine, only, with coconuts in it.
Yeah, there's no alcohol.
Here we go with the olive oil. This is fantastic. It's like, who knew you could get the variety of this stuff put into a tiny little bit of olive oil, Thank you, Curtis and Samantha. This was awesome. Hey, when you're out shopping and you've got an amazing meat or fish or whatever, this is the place. Once you've got your food in hand, come down here, ask them questions. You never know where he's going to show up next.
Here all evening, providing coverage for the 2020 BC provincial election. I'd like to start this evening by thanking our sponsors. Simpson Notaries is our presenting sponsor tonight, and in fact has been a sponsor for this entire election series. Our gold level sponsor this evening is the Kohler Epp Wealth Management Group of RBC Dominion Securities. Our silver level sponsors are Earl's Kitchen and Bar of Chilliwack, Hofstede's Country Barn, and Mark's Commercial of Chilliwack. Without these sponsors, we wouldn't have been able to bring you this evening's coverage. So we thank them very much. Let me introduce some of the people who are going to be making tonight happen. First of all, my co-host, Bud Mercer. Bud is a city councillor and spent 35 plus years in law enforcement in our country, and I'm hoping Bud's going to be able to provide lots of insight and help us understand what impact tonight's results might have on the city. Our guest expert tonight is an old and dear friend, Professor Emeritus from UFV, Scott Fast. Everyone, I think, in this community knows Scott. He's a political scientist who's followed the political scene in Chilliwack and beyond for over 40 years and taught generations of young people to understand and respect the political system. And providing news updates will be chillTV's own Don Lane. Don's broadcast career spans major market radio across the country, and we're really happy to have him give us some of his time and some of his insight. How are you doing tonight, Don?
Waiting for what could be a bizarre night, Clint. Give you an idea of the impact of what is happening in our backyard. We're being followed by Vancouver media, so a shout out to Global Television, as well as CKNW and News 1130. Also across the country to CTV Toronto, who are wondering what is going on, especially with Chilliwack, Kent. And of course, there's a few other ridings we're going to keep a close eye on too. But when it comes to the hub, Chilliwack and Chilliwack Kent seem to be the flashpoints. On a personal note, I thought I saw it all back in 1995 when I was in Ottawa, and the separatiste vote at that time was crazy. I've never seen anything like this. This supersedes that. So I'm looking forward to what could be a wild and woolly evening. It could be a short one or it could be a long one. We'll start to get some numbers shortly after 8 o'clock, and we have no idea how long we're going to be here. And that's what makes it a whole lot of fun. Guys?
Thanks so much, Don. We're going to be joined later by a number of guests tonight as the evening rolls on. At 8 o'clock, John Less, former mayor and MLA for Chilliwack, is going to join us. At 8:30, we're going to be joined by former Liberal candidate Kelly Valonis. And at 9, Willow Reichelt from the Chilliwack School Board will be our guest. So I'd like to get on with the evening. And I think the first thing I'd like to do is have Scott join us and set the table on where we've come from. Scott, 2017 was the last election, and it was a kind of a surprise election. Take us through, in your mind, some of the things that have brought us to the point we're at today. Especially in the Chilliwack area, but provincially as well.
Well, the Chilliwack area is going to be quite interesting because in both Chilliwack ridings, there have been some defections and some controversy and issues that will the voters split their vote? Will they see through it and vote for Thronis anyway? Those kinds of questions. What bitterness is there? How many followers were they? Will that split the vote in enough ways that it might open up the path for a surprise? I have no idea. I'm not on the ground in Chilliwack, so I don't know the gossip like I used to know, and I hope I'm not part of the gossip like I used to be. But on the other hand, I know what is on people's mind, and it's a point of contention for some, is the calling of the election. And the calling of the election was a perfectly parliamentary thing to do. On the one hand, you look for a mandate. You call an election when you're looking for a mandate to fight a war or to do something extraordinary. You also call elections when you're ahead of the polls and your leader's way ahead in the polls and the other party is less than dynamic. So for all of the old school political reasons and for the best of parliamentary reasons, this election got called, and I don't think any of us should be too surprised about that.
Yeah, certainly, we're in a unique position, I think, where the provincial outcome is perhaps not in too much doubt at this point in time, but the local outcomes are really in doubt. Nobody really knows what's going to happen, and that's a very unique situation. On any normal year, the three of us might be sitting here and suggesting that, Chilliwack, yawn, we know how that's going to go, but the national or the provincial election is going to be a surprise. So that's quite unique. Bud, from your perspective, talk us through Chilliwack, Kent. You're a councillor on the ground. You're involved with a number of the people that are out there putting their names forward. What's surprising and unique in your mind about Chilliwack, Kent?
Well, I think it's been it's been a crazy lead up in the last couple of months, some of the stuff that happened. But let's just very quickly look at the 5 candidates for Chilliwack, Kent. From the beginning, we've got Eli Gagné. Eli's relatively unknown in the Chilliwack, Kent area. He doesn't have a strong social media presence, if in fact he has one at all. He's got some strong ideas, and I'll be anxious to see his unfamiliarity with the area and with the voters in Chilliwack, how that develops over the night. Jeff Hammersmark, I think that's some of the stuff that Scott was talking maybe about a little bit. If you think back only a few weeks, he seemed to drop off from the race. when Jason Lum jumped on board. And then a little while later, he let his name stand. So I'm not sure how that's going to develop. In an interview I listened with him, he had a bit of a strange strategy. His parting comments were, if you believe in the Green, vote for me. If you don't, vote for Jason. Anybody but Laurie Thrones. I'm not sure how that strategy is going to play with the voters in Chilliwack, or how he'll end up at the end of the night. Kelly Padden, sorry, I don't have my glass on. Strong candidate with the NDP. Certainly switched on when it comes to being the spokesperson for the disenfranchised group within our communities, the homeless, the addicted, the people with mental challenges. Very passionate, has worked a long time in this area, and really is looking forward to be their voice at the table in Victoria. So that'll be interesting. Is an NDP candidate, and I think the questions I've been asked as I travel around is, why now during the pandemic? Why would the NDP call an election during the pandemic? So, and I think some people are honestly a little bit irritated by that. Some see it that our Premier has recognized how well Bonnie Henry has done both here in BC, and how she's been recognized around the country, and a little bit of riding the coattails of Bonnie Henry is what the perception is. So it'll be interesting how much of that is left with Kelly at the end of the night. Laurie Thrones left the Liberal Party. There's going to be controversy. Take it to the bank. There's going to be controversy. His name was on the ballot as a Liberal candidate. The election ballots had already been sent out in the mail. Many people have filled them out and sent them in, and perhaps voted for Laurie as a Liberal candidate. And of course, now he's not. And I think there's a little bit legitimate argument for folks to say, I voted for the Liberals, and now Laurie is not a Liberal. My vote is not fair. And I think there's an argument to be made. So we'll see how that works its way through the evening. And then, of course, there's Chilliwack's own Jason Lum, who joined the race very late in the day, but very well loved here in Chilliwack. And I can tell you from being a city councillor, which maybe our MLAs don't get to see, Jason has the experience where he thinks globally, but having been a city councillor for as long as he's been, he's heard every twig snap on the ground here in Chilliwack. He knows what it's like to walk 5 corners. He knows what it's like to walk with our homeless. He knows the issues intimately, whether they be very small or more globally on a provincial level. So it's going to be interesting. Some would suggest he's going to come up through the middle. I'm looking forward to see how this evening develops, but interesting nonetheless.
Thanks, Bud. I just before we talk about the Chilliwack riding, I want to get Scott's take on something you said, Bud. You talked about the snap election, and people were angry about that. And Scott, from your perspective, do you think that concern is going to change anybody's mind about how they vote, or perhaps have people stay away from the polls? What's your anticipation from what you know?
I think it's one of the reasons that people who intended to vote Liberal will say that's one of the reasons they're voting Liberal. But I don't think it had much effect one way or another. If I may comment, for those who understand the parliamentary system, this is just standard fare. Since the general level of understanding of how it works and is supposed to work and why is so low, almost anybody can claim anything is illegitimate. In this case, it was certainly opportunistic of the NDP. And I think the comment of riding the coattails of Bonnie Henry is not altogether inappropriate. And there's no question that during the pandemic, incumbent governments have been in a position that automatically made it difficult for their opposition. So in that sense, the deck was really stacked in the direction of the NDP getting another mandate, and it looks, unless the pollsters are way off, that that's what's going to happen. But there are a number of close ridings, and potentially even Chilliwack in a way that's hard to imagine. Chilliwack has seen in the past where when votes split certain ways, the NDP did well. So it will. It is very, very interesting in Chilliwack and Chilliwack Kent, and there certainly are a number of other close ridings in which I don't think we'll know for a day or so.
So often we're sitting here not knowing what the provincial outcome is going to be, but pretty certain of what our own local outcome is going to be. And I think the Chilliwack-Kent riding is an example of that. I think even more so the Chilliwack riding, where we have 6 people running for the seat. We have an incumbent MLA in John Martin, who's represented the seat as a Liberal for 7 years. But prior to that, in 2012, I think we'll all remember 2 of the players in this election, John Martin and Laurie Thronis, ran against each other, John as a Conservative and Laurie as a BC Liberal. And that provided an opportunity for Gwen O'Mahony, an NDP member, to come up the middle and in fact take the seat as those votes on the right were split. We now have a situation where Diane Jansen, who was attempting to seek the Liberal nomination, was spurned by the early election call. I think that had a lot to do with it, and was told, no, we're not going to open any seats up. So she chose then to run as a Conservative. So I believe that that may have the same effect that we've seen in the past. The winner of that splitting of the right vote might well be Dan Coulter, who's a well-known member of the community, chair of the school board, and a person who's seen as being fairly moderate. He's run a sort of standard kind of NDP campaign and followed the provincial policy, and there's been an odd campaign because there hasn't been a lot of chance for candidates to get out and interact with each other. But certainly there's been no gaffes and no slip-ups on that side. And so there's every possibility, I think, that, and it'd be interesting when we get our guests who come from all different political backgrounds to see how they feel about that. But I think those are really the three front runners, if you will. But we also have 3 other people who are bringing something very interesting to the table, starting with Tim Cooper, who I think, Scott, is an old compatriot of yours at the university.
Friend of mine? Yes.
And he's a very committed individual. I had the chance to interview Tim, and he certainly believes and lives the values that the Green Party is putting forward. I don't think he himself said he was under no illusion that he would, he was expecting he might win, but he really relished the opportunity of putting his ideas and the Green Party's ideas forward. Green Party has a very credible leader who did very well during the debates. And so I expect they may do fairly well in terms of percentage of the vote. That may come up from the last time. After that, we have an independent named Josue Anderson. I had a chance to interview Josue as well, and he's a young guy who's passionate about politics. And I had trouble nailing down in my own mind where his political philosophy might come from, something green/progressive, but with a real eye to entrepreneurial spirit and making your own way as an entrepreneur. And Andrew Coombs, who's representing the Libertarian Party. And Andrew, again, was somebody I had a chance to chat with and put forward some very interesting and I think very relevant ideas and topics about how we free ourselves from government. So I really enjoyed interviewing those folks. I'm honestly saying I don't think they're going to be in any danger of being elected. I think, however, in that Chilliwack riding, those top 3, I think that's going to be a really interesting race to watch, especially since we have the precedent of 2012 where John Martin.
Absolutely. And Coulter has proven himself as being elected and respected by his peers on the school board. So that I have to agree with you, Clint. That seems like that's the really the very, very interesting riding here in Chilliwack.
Absolutely. So do we dare do we dare make predictions? Bud, are you prepared to make a prediction on Chilliwack-Kent and one on Chilliwack?
I'll give you two. Is that
Okay.
fair? I think we're going to see Jason Lum come up the middle. I think he's going to do very well. But I also think that Laurie Thronis has a strong following that don't really see the Liberal or Independent Party as an impediment or either way. I think they'll be voting for Laurie. So I think it's going to be between those two.
And in the Chilliwack riding?
In the Chilliwack riding, I think it's going to be between Dan Coulter and Diane Jansen. That's my bet.
So you'd pick which one of those? So you're not going to actually make a prediction. You're going to waffle a little bit and say.
No, I never waffle. I'm gonna think on it a little bit.
All right, well, Scott, over to you. I know you're living in the neighboring community now, happily retired and writing books, but I know you're paying attention. Have you got a prediction for either of the two ridings?
Well, I have to say I agree with Bud about Laurie Thronis. That's my instinct there, but those instincts haven't been, they're 25 years old, so maybe they're bad instincts. On the other side, it could really be a horse race, and I have no prediction on which horse may win, but I predict it's going to be a pretty close and interesting race, and indeed, it is an opportunity for the NDP to come up the middle.
Are you going to step forward there, Clint?
Absolutely. I'm going to step forward and I'll make a prediction. I believe, given the dynamics in the Chilliwack riding that I think are almost identical to the dynamics we saw in 2012, I think that Dan Coulter is going to come up with the typically around 40% of the vote, and I think that's going to be enough to hold off Diane and John. And I think it speaks to Diane's strength, that's my opinion, speaks to her strength that she's going to capture a significant amount of the vote and saw off, I think, with John Martin. I think it could easily be 40-30-30 or somewhere around there. In the Chilliwack-Kent riding, I think there's, because we haven't had an opportunity to see the candidates post Laurie removing himself from the Liberal ballot, we haven't had an opportunity to see much interaction. So you haven't had much public reaction to that. So it's really hard to tell. I don't think any Liberal voters that were going to vote for Laurie Thronis and have changed their mind are going to go to the NDP. I think those votes are likely to go to Jason. I think there's a lot of NDP votes that when Jason threw his hat in the ring said, gee, well, he's really well known, not to take anything away from Kelly because she's a great candidate and on top of the issues, very well spoken, and we wouldn't lose much by having her as our MLA for certain. I think Jason's name recognition is going to pull votes from both of those places. So I think that one's going to be a 30-30-30 with the 10% kind of split among the others. And I think it's just going to be so much fun to watch.
If only there was that many parties to split the Conservative vote when I used to run.
Yeah, we should let voters know. I'm sure most voters know this. I think, Scott, you ran both provincially and federally for the NDP.
I ran twice provincially in Chilliwack and once federally in Abbott.
Yeah, and you were a fixture, and you certainly, and I think the politicians that will be visiting us later tonight will say that the speeches that you gave at those all candidates meetings and that were among the best ever. And I always, although I think we actually ran against each other in 1986, Scott. I remember that I almost voted for you. I thought you were so good.
Soccer team when we were both young.
That's true, yes. So we have a lot of history that we could go over, but we don't want to bore our audience with. So the turnout in the last election was about 61% of the vote. Now, that's about kind of an average. What are people feeling about the turnout? I voted early, and there was a steady stream of people voting early. We had mail-in ballots for the first time. What are we thinking about turnout here, Bud? Today I was at the polls about noon. There was nobody at Chatkin Hall at noon. They said it was busier earlier in the day and that. What are you feeling about the turnout here?
I think it's going to be good in spite of the the pandemic we're in. I think many people, such as myself and my wife, we took opportunities of the opportunity to get a mail-in ballot, but then to fill it out and take it in to a voting station and drop it off. This morning I was on the road at about 7:45, driving by the Mount Slessy school in Sardis, and I probably saw 10, 12 people had parked their cars and were actually walking to Mount Slessy School, which was one of the voting stations today. I don't have much more information than that, as I wasn't in the downtown area.
Scott, obviously you weren't hanging around polls in Chilliwack today, but what do you think the impact would be on a lower than normal turnout or a high turnout? Who benefits when a whole lot of people come out to vote, do you think?
I think that depends on the issues and the personality. It depends on how polarized the electorate is and how terrified they might be that the other gets elected or not. I think here, advanced voting is something more and more people have done. It's been made really available, or mail-in ballots. I kind of anticipate the turnout to be about the same here, but this election may be reasons for all of us to revise our thinking on some of those things.
Now, mail-in ballots, this is the first time there has been the opportunity for mail-in ballots. People used them a lot, and we won't get a chance to have those ballots counted until after the election, so we're not entirely sure how much of the results we're going to be able to provide tonight, because we're not really sure what percentage of the ballot.
In really close writings, we will know. The advance ballots are counted tonight. In many of the elections, it's interesting, some exit polling from advance voting had shown very strongly NDP, and somebody did some poll of mail-in ballots, and I guess they're asking people, did you mail in your ballot and how did you vote? I don't know whether that data is more than anecdotal. I imagine that's all it is. So I expect the turnout to be about the same. What do you think?
Well, Judge, I was expecting that, and I was shocked when I went to the poll today, and it frightened me because it's generally quite busy, and it wasn't. But then I forgot. There's been so many opportunities to cast ballots beforehand, and as you said correctly, those advanced polls that were open, those ballots will be counted along with the ballots that are cast today. It's only the mail-in ballots that we're going to be delayed on. But
there was
go ahead,
study.
Scott.
There was a study stream in Abbotsford when I voted on Tuesday in an advance poll. And there were no long lineups, but it was active voting.
Well, we all win. We all win when as many people as possible vote, because certainly then we're getting the will of the people put forward. You know, when this election was called and shortly thereafter, as the polling was done, I think we ended up polling that showed the NDP at around 48%, the Liberals about 34%, Greens and others taking in 17%. The Greens, they're polling at about 15%. In the last election, the polling, of course, or the actual numbers in the last election, I think Liberals and NDP sawed off at 40% each, and the Greens came in at around 17%. So it looks like that Green vote has slipped a little bit and seems to have gone back to the NDP, but also the Liberal vote seems to have slipped a fair bit. Be interesting when we get former Mayor John Less and of course former Liberal MLA and Cabinet Minister. Be interesting to talk to John about what he thinks has been the reason for the Liberal slip. There has, obviously there's been things locally, but there's questions about Andrew Wilkinson's leadership and is he the right leader? And certainly having the election called the way it was at a time when I'm thinking not everybody was ready for it. I'll be interested to hear John's take on his thoughts on the Liberal Party, and are we seeing something like happened to the Social Credit Party years ago, where they were in a bit of disarray and didn't do well in the election, which caused, at that time, Rita Johnson was the leader, and she, of course, had taken over for Bill Vander Zalm, and there was that whole 1991 to 96 kind of stuff that went on there. So in the riding last time, John Martin had 48% of the vote. Laurie Thrones got 52% of the vote. And the NDP had garnered around 32% of the vote. That's where my prediction in the Chilliwack riding with John, Diane, and Dan, why I feel like if Dan builds a little on that 32%, which I think he will because of name recognition, that I think that riding may go to the NDP. So we're going to take a little bit of a break at the top of the hour here. We're getting close to the time when polls are closing. So we'll be back in just a couple of minutes after I think we take a bit to recognize some of our sponsors and do some of those kind of things. We're going to be back with John Less as our guest. As I said, John's a former Liberal MLA and held cabinet posts in the government, continued after his retirement from government to work on a number of boards and commissions. So I'm going to take a chance to say, hey John, what you've been doing after politics, and give us some thoughts on where we are there. So Scott, I want you to stay tuned, and thanks for the great insight as always. Bud, I want you to just sit tight where you are. And for those that are watching, I just need you to know we're sitting close together, but you can see the plexiglass waving. We're protected from each other. We're being as COVID safe as we can in this new reality. So we'll be back at you in just a little while. Thanks so much for watching.
All right. Time to pee. Are you here? Are you upstairs?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Wasting away, watching clouds float by my window. I wait for the day, but it never seems to come. Tracing away the path that I keep inside me. Only one way.
I'm Don Lane, the news director for chillTV. This could be one wild, long night, and we're prepared for it. We're going to be following, obviously, Chilliwack Kent and the riding of Chilliwack throughout the entire evening. There's also a few other areas that we're going to keep an eye on, one of which is Abbotsford South. Bruce Banman is involved in that one as the BC Liberal, but also Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson, who has always been controversial with Christian heritage. Also, when it comes to Abbotsford Mission, Pam Alexis, the mayor of Mission, is trying to get into the legislature. We'll see how that works out. One other person that has been rather quiet has been in Surrey, and that is Stephanie Cadjo, who a few years ago was a rather controversial, shall we say, minister when it comes to children and families. But everyone across Canada has been getting a hold of chillTV and asking us, Chilliwack Kent, what is going on? And we're just as curious as you are. Not to diminish what's happening on the other side of the freeway with Chilliwack. So the numbers just slowly trickling in, so we don't really have anything concrete right now. One thing we can tell you is that the three major pollers, and that is Angus Reid, as well as Research Co. and 338 Canada, or Canada 338, however you want to call it, they're all pretty much in agreement in saying that the NDP overall could take 50 to 54 seats. Again, we'll see how this pans out. But the bottom line is the final poll is the final election result of the evening. And again, this is going to be a wild ride. For our friends across the country who are following us, welcome. And our moderators this evening, Clint Hames and Bud Mercer.
Thanks so much for that update, Don. Appreciate those. We'll be getting those updates on the hour from Don, and on the half hour. Is it on the half hour? On the hour? Half hour. There we are. On the half hour from Don. So you're not going to miss a thing in terms of provincial numbers. And I was corrected, as I said, I think this is the first time we've used mail-in ballots. That is not true. I was corrected by a friend who sent a text, and he said, no, we've used mail-in ballots before, but they've been not very well used. So they weren't a factor in the past. They may be very much in the future. So it's my pleasure right now to introduce someone who's really not a stranger to anyone in Chilliwack, because John Less was the mayor of Chilliwack. I think I got the dates right, John, 1986 to 1999, the mayor of Chilliwack, and prior to that, a member of City Council, and in 2001 was elected to the provincial legislature as a BC Liberal and held cabinet position as a Solicitor General. And we're just delighted, John, to have you here this evening. I understand you're taking some issue with my election predictions, so I'd be happy to say, okay, from your perspective, John, where do you see this election in Chilliwack and Chilliwack Kent going?
Well, just to agree with you and Bud, first of all, this is going to be an interesting evening in the two Chilliwack ridings. Probably interesting in a way that we have not seen before. First of all, provincially, I think it's fairly clear to most observers that we will see a majority NDP government at the end of the night, although the exact results are weeks away. Because of the mail-in vote. Over 500,000 mail-in votes will have to be counted around mid-November. So for ridings that are close, we're not simply going to know the results tonight, but going by the overall provincial percentages on the votes that have been counted, I think it'll be relatively easy to make a projection as to the overall result. When it comes to the two Chilliwack ridings, they've been, both of them, somewhat in turmoil, I guess. First of all, Chilliwack Kent, with all the goings-on with Laurie Thrones. Projecting that one, I would say Laurie is still likely to win that one. But I doubt that he will get anything over 40%, which is, of course, way down from where he was in 2017. And I think the NDP will be second in that riding and Jason Lum third. In the Chilliwack riding, that one is a dead heat, in my view, between John Martin and Dan Coulter. Diane Jansen's candidacy there for the Conservative Party will do some damage to John Martin, that's for sure. With the popular vote up across the province for the NDP, I think that will help Dan Coulter some. So if I had to call that one, I would probably, if I had to put $1,000 on it, I would say Dan Coulter has a shot at that one. Chilliwack may look a little different. Now, that's not a replay of 2012. I think you've referred to earlier, Clint. The 2012 situation was a by-election.
Yep.
By-elections always have a completely different dynamic than what occurs in a general election. So I don't think it's a replay particularly of that scenario, but for the factors I've already mentioned, I think Chilliwack is very much a riding on the bubble this evening.
So one of the things I've said to people, John, is that when you have a riding that people aren't sure what the outcome is going to be, that can often be a good thing for a riding because it draws the attention of the provincial government, whoever it is, whether it's NDP, Liberal, Green, or whatever. When they say, look, this is a riding that we have to pay attention to, we could make some gains there, or we could lose our seat there, that you can tend to get some interest from the province, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I could argue that both ways. If an area has been, reliably represented over many, many years by certain parties, when those parties come into office, then, those areas tend to perhaps do better than others in terms of the attention of government. If we have an NDP majority government at the end of the day, let's say that they have something in the order of 55, 60 seats, which I think they might well have. Then if Dan Coulter is part of that, I don't think that he would wield any outsized influence in terms of that. There would be, almost 60 other NDP MLAs that would be looking to hand out, the goodies to their various ridings. And believe you me, the next 4 years are going to be awfully difficult for whoever is government.
Well, I think they're full of promises to hand out goodies, but we'll see what happens.
Welcome to yet another election.
Yeah,
but the reality of the next 4 years is not going to be that favorable to be, everybody knows that, given the COVID crisis and all of that kind of thing. So it's going to be a difficult 4 years, and I think those difficulties are on the doorstep now, and I think it was one of the things that motivated John Horgan to pull the plug and call the snap election.
Yeah, no question. Bud?
Yeah, John, welcome. Intentionally putting you on the spot. Have a look at the two ridings and the candidates, and maybe make a comment on which of the candidate, maybe even if it's more than one, hit it out of the park on some of the issues, some of their platforms, and what you, from your experience, maybe some of the candidates missed an opportunity where they could have done just a bit better.
Bud, that's an awfully difficult question to answer because of the nature of this campaign. And everybody socially distancing and no campaign events particularly. What there was essentially online with, I believe, one or two Zoom-type all candidates meetings. It was hard to get a read on the individual candidates. I don't think that this is an election that's going to turn too much in what individual candidates had to say. It is quite often the case that when you have candidates running for various parties, that prior to that time, a lot of people have not heard of these candidates. And I think it's one of the things that's really too bad about this campaign is that individual candidates were not able to get out and introduce themselves more fully to the electorate. And I think one of the victims of that, quite frankly, is Jason Lum. Jason is a likable guy. I know him well. And has done, a lot of good work. He's chair of the Fraser Valley Regional District. Now, I was chair of the Fraser Valley Regional District for 9 years. That doesn't necessarily make you a household name throughout the region. So I don't see that as the opportunity that he had to introduce himself to people in the Chilliwack-Kent riding. He might have actually had a better shot had he run in the Chilliwack riding. And I've said that from the beginning. Wrong riding, wrong party. I think Jason should have run for the NDP. And he'd likely be the MLA tonight. But, these are the different factors that kind of are at play out there. But in terms of what has each candidate done, I can't think of anything, frankly, that either individually Dan Coulter or John Martin have said or announced. It was all basically their party platform, And of course, in Chilliwack, Kent, Laurie Thrones distinguished himself by, kind of blowing up mid-campaign and deserting his party or being kicked out of the party or whatever. So there was that bit of fuss there. But, I'm going to suggest that the NDP candidate in that riding is no better known to the voters in that riding today than she was 5 weeks ago.
If we accept that for a minute, and I would agree with you that not being able to debate the issues and have those public discussions and town halls as they were, do you think then it's left to history and name recognition to a large extent?
Yeah, there are two factors ultimately when people mark their ballot. One, it's the candidate, and secondly, it's the party. And parties have long coattails. Used to be said back in the day, let's take it back to social credit days. You could run a billy goat for social credit in the Fraser Valley and the billy goat would get elected. We, like I say, there's always two factors at play. Now, it's a little bit odd right now, of course, in the Chilliwack Kent riding where of, let's say, the three leading candidates, two of them are running independent and the third is running NDP. So the two independents don't have that benefit of those coattails. Maybe Laurie still has some of the residual benefit of that. And of course the NDP candidate does, but Jason does not have that. So it's one of the factors that goes into, my prediction of what might happen in that riding tonight.
So John, I wanted to ask a little bit about the Liberal Party. They did not appear, and it's just my assessment, but they did not appear ready for this election. I think they were hoping it wouldn't get called. They didn't seem to be overly comfortable with the leader they had chosen. He was almost an interim. It felt like that in many ways. What's your assessment of where the Liberal Party is at right now, and where do they need to go in order to gain back the kind of provenance they had before this election was called?
Well, clearly they were not ready. Absolutely they were not. And they, I think, were held back by the new campaign financing rules. The corporate sector was unable to support them in the ways that they had done before. And, to be fair, the same is true on the NDP side. Organized labor was not able to support the NDP in the same way either that they could in the past because of this new legislation, but it hurt the Liberals more. So they were not ready, they were not organized, they didn't have all of their candidates in place. And when a government leader like John Horgan is about to call a snap election, he's got the advantage. And of course he had everybody guessing for maybe about a month ahead of time. So they were not ready. That's on the leader. And getting to the other part of your question, how did Andrew Wilkinson do? Well, first of all, most of this year he was battling the whole COVID epidemic in a different way. It denied him the opportunity in the year leading up to an election to gain some prominence and to stake out some potentially adversarial positions. All the opposition could do during this COVID pandemic was tuck in with the provincial government, the NDP, and say, we support all of this. Bonnie Henry's doing a great job. Adrian Dix is doing a great job. They could not be contrary in that situation. So that does not help when you're the official opposition and you're agreeing with government all the time. Government is passing legislation of billions of dollars at a time of aid to people. They simply were left in the role of going along with that. I know Andrew Wilkinson very well. He used to be my deputy minister when I was Minister of Economic Development. One of the smartest people I've ever known, a real can-do guy, great attitude, but none of that counts for anything when you cannot resonate or connect with the public. And Andrew was, for whatever reason, unable to do that. So depending on the result tonight, I think the party's going to have to do some work to figure themselves out, and I wouldn't be terribly surprised if that also means that they're going to have to go through a leadership process again.
Bud?
Yeah, thank you, John. Just a follow-up on your comment about party loyalty. I was recently listening to a cable news network outlet that was talking about the new generation, and that the new generation frankly, percentage-wise, couldn't care less about a party, but were more interested in the candidate and what the candidate stood for. How do you see that? Is it that a little too nouveau for Chilliwack, or do you think that has some merit?
Well, that works if you have a candidate that's really out there and has a charisma that is really unusual and takes positions that really resonate with the average middle-class voter. But other than that, I still think party labels play a significant role. There are people in all kinds of ridings that will never vote NDP or they will never vote BC Liberal, regardless. Elections are always about the 20% in the middle. And those are the targets, obviously, of election campaigns. If you've been a lifelong NDP supporter, chances are you're still going to be one of those, the same on the BC Liberal side. I wish sometimes that there was more emphasis on the individual candidates and their individual characteristics and points where they are strong or not. But our parliamentary system in Canada has evolved to the point where parties are very important, and party leaders are, I would say, extraordinarily important and influential to a fault. I think we have developed governments at all levels, provincial and federal, that are far too centralized. And once elected, leaders are, they can lord it over MLAs and MPs far too much than I think is healthy.
Yeah, leadership is really extraordinarily present in certainly in our federal government right now and in the provincial government. John Horgan the pandemic handed him an opportunity to be a leader, and you were right. Your remarks about what could the opposition do? It had to go along and say, look, this is so important, we're going to support what's going on. And then to call an election at the end of that, strategically, it's brilliance, but it's certainly left the Liberals in a difficult position. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about policy, the policies that are being put forward by the Liberal and the NDP. I was shaking my head a little bit when I was hearing some of the spending policies that were coming forward from both parties, but especially the Liberals, who seem to want to spend a lot of money in the next few years on infrastructure and other things. And I was struggling to get a plan from anyone as I interviewed folks about the plan, how you're going to recover from that, how you're going to pay that back over time. There was brave talk about, well, we'll balance the budget in 5 years without speaking to the debt that might be accumulated in that part of time. I've worked with you, John, for however many years, and I know your feelings about governments that spend more money than they take in. What was your thought on the Liberals' platform in this election?
Well, it seems that given the pandemic, everybody's kind of taken the position, spend whatever, without much regard at this moment as to exactly how we're going to rebalance over time. I think the 5-year projections that the BC Liberals put forward are totally aspirational. I don't foresee, frankly, a balanced budget within 5 years. There's a lot of people are suggesting that we're going to spend our way out of this economic hole we've got into as a result of COVID. I think it's going to have to go a lot deeper than that. Economic policies themselves are going to have to be adjusted, I believe, and regulatory policies are going to have to be adjusted to enable the private sector economy to reignite, so that revenues will start flowing into government, because at the end of the day, there's still a massive need for public funding to support healthcare, education, childcare, all of those kinds of things. Those don't go away, nor should they. So, as I said earlier, the challenge for whoever is elected government is enormous. And of course, they do that in the context of, the national and the global economy. We're talking about the BC provincial election tonight, but, BC has a population roughly the size of Kansas in the United States. We need to remind ourselves once in a while that this is not the center of the universe. We are part of a national and global community that also will impact on how our economic recovery goes after this.
Certainly, Bud.
Yeah, a follow-up to that, John. When I looked at some of the, I don't want to say promises that the candidates were making and about some of their priorities if they were to be elected, I didn't see any of those priorities were the financial reality of the life we now live in, and as you have said, is going to be with us for years. How realistic do you believe many of these priorities or plans or offers, if I'm elected going forward, are actually going to be a reality, or are they all?
Well, I think they were sincerely put forward, but the reality of the situation post-pandemic is going to be very constraining for governments.
Yeah.
I think they're going to run large deficits for a number of years. Hopefully, the BC Liberals put forward sort of an aspirational goal of in 5 years they would balance. I don't think anybody would be able to do that, but perhaps we'd be within a few $billion of balancing. I mean, the projections are that in the current fiscal year we're going to be $15 billion in the hole. Absolutely unthinkable just a year ago, but here we are. Nationally, we're a third of $1 trillion in the hole. So, let's not minimize the challenge that governments face. Clearly, some of the things that they've aspirationally talked about during the campaign are not going to happen. Fiscal realities have a harshness about them that precludes sometimes the best of intentions. So we'll see. I mean, what will change, of course, with what I believe will be an NDP majority government, will be, John Horgan and his cabinet will be more able to govern without reference to other parties, particularly the Greens, who I do think had a bit of an impact on them in terms of holding them back here and there. And bringing some of their own ideas to the table. That won't be the case going forward. So that too adds sort of a different dimension to how government is going to proceed.
Follow up to that, John. I notice in a couple of the candidates' bios and what they stood for, and I go back to my time as the chief of police here in Chilliwack, and I believe at that time you were on council. If I look at the provincial policing component, and by way of explanation for the viewers out there, the Chilliwack detachment is a mixture of resources that the city pays for and the positions that the province pays for to take care of all of the provincial or regional areas outside of the actual city of Chilliwack. In 1998, Chilliwack detachment had 7 provincial resources. In the last 22 years, they've gone through huge population growths. The situation has changed on the ground in policing. The city has done their best to keep up with the pace of providing adequate policing to the city. But in the provincial areas since 1998, the provincial government has added exactly 1 resource. They've gone from 7 provincial resources to 8. And it's become a real issue that the taxpayers of Chilliwack are now paying for. And I see on a couple of the candidates' bios and their positions that they're actually talking about that. Do you think those kind of things resonate with the voters, or do you think they're looking at things like twinning the Trans-Canada Highway and those other, maybe other social issues?
Well, when it comes to the minutia of who's paying for what, the average voter in the area sees a police car and they're not doing a calculation as to who is paying for that police officer and that equipment. So I don't think there's a have a heck of an argument for saying, wait a minute, we need a few of those folks here because our area is growing and disproportionately the municipalities are having to finance the policing for the electoral areas.
I think municipalities is popular among provincial governments if they can find a way to make that happen, or to ignore something so that local governments are left with a position where they have to do something. I think you'd probably find a lot of local government folks say that's an issue. Certainly, one of the things that's been addressed quite well in our community over the last number of years, certainly started with the provincial Liberal government and continued with the NDP, was housing for people who are homeless. We have an incredible number of resources in Chilliwack, and some of that was, of course, provided when I think Rich Coleman was the Minister of Housing with the Liberal government, and certainly has continued. That seems to be a number one issue with folks here. Which party do you think has got a good plan for that, John?
For housing?
For housing for homeless, and let's talk and say addictions and mental health issues.
Well, all parties have struggled with that issue. I think 3.5 years ago when the NDP took power in British Columbia, there was some hope that they, with their focus on it, would be able to affect some change. I think some good things have been done, but I don't think it can be said that the problem has been in any way lessened. There's still a serious problem out there with addictions. I see more of a trend perhaps over the last few months as these things have been debated towards admitting we need to have treatment, not just housing, and I certainly would agree with that. Giving somebody simply a roof over their head, that's great, but if they're addicted, they need treatment. Otherwise, it is unlikely even with housing, that they will succeed. So, huge area. It's something that ought to concern all of us because it is a significant societal problem.
No question. And John, I want to take this opportunity on behalf of Bud and I to say thanks so much for being here this evening and providing your insight. You're welcome to hang around and shout from the sidelines if you think we've messed something up. And
I've been told I can't shout in here.
Well,
I don't know.
We'll waive that requirement. But I really do want to say thank you so much. You add so much to evenings like this with your experience and your knowledge. And we're gonna cut to a quick break and then back with some updates. It looks like some results are coming in, and at this point in time, they look pretty darn interesting. So we'll be back in just a minute with an update from Don Lane.
Wasting away, watching clouds float by my window. I wait for the day, but it never seems to come. Tracing away the path that I keep inside me. Only one way.
provincial election coverage on chillTV. I'm Don Lane, chillTV News Director. We're now starting to get some numbers trickling in for Chilliwack. Only one of the 82 polling areas now reporting. And again, only one. It's very early. John Martin leading 19 votes to Diane Jansen's 13. Dan Coulter has 15. Again, very, very early. Nothing yet for Chilliwack Kent. We are waiting on that. Provincially, though, so far, and again, the magic number is 44 for a majority out of the 87 seats. Right now, the NDP leading or elected in 28. The Liberals leading or elected in 21. And the Greens with 4. Again, the magic number that we are looking at are 44 seats. Still very early in the game, but as these boxes are now being opened, all the paperwork is being done, we will probably start seeing these numbers accelerate probably over the next half hour. And of course, having said that, prove me wrong. We are dealing with Elections BC, and there's my soapbox. Back to our guys who are leading our coverage this evening, Clint Hames and Bud Mercer.
Thanks for that update, Don. We're joined now in the studio. Bud and I are pleased to welcome Kelly Valonis, who is here tonight with us. Kelly, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You're here as somebody who's pretty attuned into the community and also somebody who's got a little political experience. Kelly ran as a federal Liberal representative in the last federal election. We sat in these very chairs watching the results trickle in. Welcome. What's your thoughts tonight as you're watching these results come in?
Well, like Don said, the results are pretty early, but I do have a prediction. I predict about 44% actually in the Chilliwack riding for Dan Coulter, and my prediction for the Chilliwack Kent riding, well, it's going to be very, very close, but I do see that Jason Lum is going to come out ahead, and I think that we're going to come in behind with Kelly Padden. I don't see Laurie Thronis coming out ahead this time.
Interesting. We'll probably get a good sense of that. I see that we've got some results coming in for the Chilliwack riding, just a little more than what Don had reported on. Dan Coulter now showing 30% of the vote. That's 27 votes cast. So those are really early numbers. But it's looking 30% for Dan, Diane Jansen polling at 28.9 and John Martin at 27.8. So I think as predicted, that race is going to get very, very close all through the night. Mm-hmm. Kelly, when you watched Chilliwack and Chilliwack Kent playing out over the last few weeks, what were your thoughts? What's going through your mind? Give us what you were feeling about these races.
Well, it's been kind of like trying to follow a bouncing ball around lately. There's been so much change. At first, Diane Jansen was coming out and going to be running for the Liberal Party, and that didn't work out for her, and she quickly turned that around and jumped in full force with the Conservatives. And I really think that Diane doing that, she's probably going to split that vote there for the Liberals. She's going to take those votes away, and I think that's what's going to put Dan over the top there. Let's go to Chilliwack Kent. Yeah, very interesting. Personally, I'm a Jason Lum fan. I'm rooting for Jason. I disagree a little bit with some of the things that John said about him not being as well known. I see Jason Lum as very well known in this community. He's somebody who, being on the FERD, but also being on council for the last 3 terms. And he's just a really likable guy. He's a guy that shares his thoughts, his views with everybody. He jumps in. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty. He was the only one in city council who voted for that rainbow crosswalk. So I think he's well known in this community, in Chilliwack Kent, and in this riding here. He's done so much lately, I think we're going to be surprised at the polls with this. I really do. Laurie Thronis, that was a shock for everybody. All of a sudden, 2 days in, and now he's running as an independent after saying he didn't see an independent doing very well as an MLA. So it'll be interesting to see where those votes lie. I know there was a lot of people that voted early, a lot of people that mailed their ballots in, and like John said, a lot of people do vote party. So a lot of people voted for that Liberal Party, and those votes are still going to count for him. So it'll be very interesting tonight and very interesting in the weeks to come to see what the fallout will be and what the conversations will be around that.
Yeah, I think we will be having a conversation at some point tonight about those mail-in ballots and what may or may not happen with them. Bud?
Well, I'm just going to get right into that now. Kelly, thanks for your comments. I was watching a very active and at times aggressive Facebook discussion. Some of the comments were I would suggest, more learned than others, and some were just mean-spirited by the keyboard warriors that troll the internet in their basements. But the discussion was around Lori Thronis and a discussion we had earlier tonight that mail-in ballots had gone out. People had voted potentially for Lori Thronis and the Liberal Party. And if I go back to what our last guest, John Less, commented about, people are still very much attached to their parties. So what do we say to the people who filled out their mail-in ballot, voted for Lori, or voted for the Liberal Party, either or voted for both, and now there's a separation of the two? Because there are a group of people that are very vocal that said, I voted for the Liberal Party, not Lori Thronis, and now he's not part of the Liberal Party. This is not fair. My vote's not counting. How do you respond to that, and do you see if that's some of the baggage that maybe Lori's carrying right now?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because I've been hearing that a lot in the role that I do at work. I work with seniors mainly, and a lot of seniors are attached to their party. And we've been hearing from a lot of people that they feel a little bit, they're let down. They believe that their vote shouldn't count and they should be able to recast their votes. Now, obviously, Elections BC, that's not the way things go. And those votes will be counted for Lori and they won't be counted for the Liberal Party. But it'll be very interesting if the outcome is different than I predicted tonight, what's going to happen in this riding, and if there will be, I don't know, an uproar, I guess to say, of people. I know if I cast my ballot for a party, if I was very strong for a party, and then that person now was running as an independent, I would want my vote, I would want the opportunity to change that vote.
Thank you.
I think it will be interesting, depending on how close that outcome is, and if there is. If somebody says, gee, I think I was cheated out of votes, or somebody got votes they shouldn't have got, I fully expect that this won't be over if it's a very close election in that riding. If the will of the people is overwhelming, obviously there'll be less chance for people
Clint, wasn't there another issue with Election BC telling people to write in their party?
This was early on in the mail-in ballots. They said you can just write the name of the party in the ballot and it will be counted for that person. So I don't know, we haven't had any insight, and I've tried to find out how those ballots will be counted. We also, at the time, I heard one candidate say you can just write independent and that vote will go to me. Well, now we have two independent people running. So if I was one of those independent candidates, I'd want to claim every one of those independent votes. But so depending on how many of those votes there are, depending on how close the election is, I expect that we could see some challenge to this, and that's not unheard of in Chilliwack. There was a municipal election that was actually overturned many years ago because of people feeling like voting irregularities had occurred. So I think we have a ways to go before Chilliwack-Kent is decided, unless it's decided overwhelmingly.
Interesting, Clint. I just wanted to say something on that. We had somebody that went in to vote, and they didn't, for early voting, advanced voting, and they didn't vote within their own riding, which you're able to go into advanced polling and vote. So they were given a blank ballot to write in, and this person was told, do not write the name in, you must write the party. And as you said, there's two independents, so that person wrote independent on their ballot. So who does that vote go for?
Yeah, I think that's...
And that was the direction of a BC elections staff member telling a voter who's confused already, because one day someone's a Liberal, the next day now they're an independent, they don't know what to write down. So now how will that vote be counted, or will that be a wasted ballot?
It'll be interesting to see, and somebody smarter than anyone in this room is going to be able to
figure that one out,
which is going to be hard to find, smarter than us. Kelly, I wanted to ask you, you've got your ear to the ground, you work with seniors, you are an active part of Chilliwack. What do you see as the issues that you hope whoever is elected representing these two ridings, what do you hope the issues are that they'll tackle first for the community?
The opiate crisis, homelessness. we need more treatment. We need more treatment beds, we need more housing, and we need to take care of our seniors because this last government hasn't done that. Our seniors are, 45% of the seniors in Chilliwack are living in poverty. 1 in 7 single seniors in this town live in poverty. So I wonder how any government can say that that's okay. So really, I hope whoever gets in, and I do see it's going to be an NDP government, I hope they hold true to their promise of supporting seniors and hold true to their promise of really tackling this opiate crisis. We need to have a wraparound approach. We need that full 4-pillar approach. It's treatment, it's housing, we need to decriminalize drugs. As far as I'm concerned, we need safe injection sites. So I really hope that we have a government that's going to stand up and start to do that because BC here, we're suffering.
Thank you. I think the issues that you raise, I mean, I think previously John Less mentioned that these are issues that just seem to be stuck with us. We don't seem to be making a lot of headway. I think the good news is we have a lot of passion moving in that direction, but we're not making a lot of headway. But I'm going to ask you, because you're a member of City Council, and this is obviously on your plate as much as anyone's. What's the city hoping? How's the city hoping to move forward with a new government to work on the issue of homelessness, addictions, the mental health crisis we have on our streets, those sorts of things?
Yeah, we could fill this room and spend a weekend talking about those issues. In fairness to the provincial government we have, they have invested heavily in Chilliwack when it comes to shelter beds, low-cost housing, subsidized housing. The list goes on and on and on. And the city's done their part in the cost-sharing models with other in-kind contributions. So they have treated us. They have treated us well. But I agree so fully with Kelly that the addiction is so much a big part of it, addiction and mental health. And sometimes the mental health comes from chronic addiction, of course. But there's a fallacy about housing because, the 100 letters a month we get at the city about stop the housing, don't do any more, enough is enough. And, I go back and, I think people predicted that I would take the iron road to this issue and say, the hell with all of them, put them in jail. But addiction is a sickness. And you cannot convince somebody who is sick, whether it's mental health or addiction, that treatment's a good thing if they're living under a box. They have to have hope first, and hope comes with a roof. So I just had to put that plug in because the province is doing a lot of good work for us. But where we're falling short is every week I hear anecdotal cases that an addict has come to wit's end. They ask for help and there's nowhere for them to go. There's nowhere to put them. There's no bed that's available. There's a bed to sleep on because we have plenty of shelter beds in the city, but there's nowhere for them to go to get treatment. And that's the Achilles heel, in my view, is the treatment and the capacity for treatment for drug addiction and mental health in this province. So for me, when I'm looking at these candidates, that's the piece that I zero in on, because it's not just a Chilliwack problem, it's not just a BC problem, it's a Canadian problem. But I think our new provincial government has an opportunity to go a long way to helping to fix that.
I want to jump in with another issue that's related. We have a lot of criminal activity that's associated with and takes advantage of the fact that we have people living on the margins. Those are people that might be supplying drugs, and those are people that might be stealing things and getting money and using that as a way to finance drug habits. And we have a crisis in that regard in many areas of the community. The court system in our province is overwhelmed. We know that because we see that people appear in court, and then it takes months and months and months often for those people to be disposed of. Kelly, what's your sense of what role improving in the courts could improving the court system in our community?
Well, you're absolutely right, Clint. I know of a few cases that, it's been over a year and nothing's being done. So it just gets, and I mean, we have to remember that during COVID, pretty much everything shut down in the courts, and so a lot of court cases were getting put forward and held off. But the fact remains is that I don't think that we have enough funding in our courts. But I also believe that if we decriminalized some of these activities, such as drug use, we would have more room in our court systems to deal with the real crime. And like you said, a lot of times when people are on drugs, there's a mental illness as well. So if we start to humanize people again, we start to put our funding and the sources there, then I think that that's a well-balanced approach. But I see that our system needs a big upheaval, and we need a lot more dollars in our criminal system here.
Yeah, I'm just going to update here. I had a text from somebody who is following the show, and thank you for watching, who said that they had contacted BC Elections BC, to find out about what happens with a vote that came in on a mail-in ballot with the word independent. Because Jason was a registered independent at the time those ballots went out, he would get those votes. They wouldn't go to someone who became an independent through the campaign. So thanks very much for that clarification, Trevor. Glad you're watching. It's nice to know there's people out there that are paying attention. At this time, I was really hoping that I might be able to get Scott back into the debate. We're getting some election results for Chilliwack Kent and for Chilliwack now. We're seeing Dan Coulter in the Chilliwack riding staying in the lead, and that lead seems to be growing. Now, these are really early returns, but early returns often set a trend as we move forward, and I wanted to see if we could get maybe Scott's take on that. We're seeing in the Chilliwack Kent riding, Laurie Thronis is doing well, as was predicted by John Less. He is getting right now 40% of the vote. Kelly Padden with 29 and Jason Lum with 21% of the vote. So that riding, those are early days. While we're arranging to get Scott on, your thoughts on that, Kelly?
Just as I predicted, for sure, in the Chilliwack riding, I thought Dan was going to come out strong right from the very beginning. A little bit surprised in the Chilliwack Kent riding, but like you said, it's early, so they're early numbers, and anything can happen. They're very close between Kelly and Jason right now, and I think that once more polling centers come in, we'll get better results.
Yeah, Bud, over to you for comments on those. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all, as Kelly said, with Chilliwack. A little bit surprised with Chilliwack Kent, but it's, as everybody said, it's very, very early in the night. I notice provincially here with the NDP at 47, Liberal at 33, there are closed or in progress, and that seems to be flipping a little bit. The same number 1, 2, and 3 have stayed the same, but the numbers get close and fade away, so it's still early.
Yeah. So just going to check and see if we can. We have Scott on the line. Scott, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I'd like to get your take. What we're seeing in Chilliwack is Chilliwack riding is as you suggested. Dan Coulter is leading, and in Chilliwack Kent, Laurie Thronis is leading. Some of your thoughts on that?
Well, somehow as I suggested, I think Thronis will hold.
I'm not getting any of Scott's audio. I don't know if you guys are. Sorry. Hang on a sec, Scott, and we'll just check and make sure that feed is going out. While we're waiting for that, just a quick look at some of the other ridings that are around us. It looks like the Liberal stronghold that is the Fraser Valley is holding apart from that one riding, the Chilliwack riding, where Dan Coulter is doing well. And in the Chilliwack Kent, of course, as John had mentioned, and is very important in these ridings, name recognition is a really important thing, and that seems to be bearing out with Laurie Thronis getting, at this point, 40% of the vote. So we'll be watching those pretty closely. In the Fraser-Nicola region, which is close to us, it's showing Jackie Taggart as a Liberal winning, which is a little bit surprising in that riding. That is often a riding that goes back and forth, but that very interesting that riding is going that way. How are we making out on Scott? He's there. Do we have any sound yet for him?
Hello?
Oh, there we have it. We seem to have it back. So go ahead, Scott. Your thoughts on what you're seeing in the Fraser Valley and Chilliwack?
Well, as everybody has rightly noted, it's really, really early. Often the smaller polls come in earlier. So they tend to be more outlying. In Chilliwack, at least in the good old days, and in many elections, the vote would get a little bit more conservative as they got closer to the center. I'm not surprised that Ronas appears in the early voting to perhaps be holding on. And after all, if he gets elected as an independent, he's going to pretty much vote with the Liberals anyway, I imagine. And many of his supporters may think of it that way. In Chilliwack, I guess I'll be surprised that if John Martin doesn't hang on, the scenarios that others have indicated, perhaps the New Democrats being in a position to come up the middle is what the early indications. But again, they're early.
Can't see it.
So what's happening out in the Abbotsford area? Are you paying attention at all to some of those ridings and the early results? Is there anything coming in there?
I'm just starting to, in between here. I see one of my favorite candidates, a student of Diane, is leading in Langley, so I showed some interest in that, although Lord knows I've got students running everywhere. Anyway, but it was early. I'd be surprised if he can defeat the incumbent there. But they said they had, as he said to me once, well, the NDP's offering a hospital and a highway. You know, I think I got a good chance. So we'll see. Anyway, to this point, it's holding. It's holding out.
I think what's interesting in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia, I'd be willing to bet that there are a number of candidates out there that are former students of yours. You had a way of indoctrinating them quite nicely into the philosophy. So
yeah, I mean, I must have been a terrible teacher because so many of them ran for the wrong parties. But in any event,
You did your best, Scott. You did your best. We're getting more results in, which is interesting. The Chilliwack Kent riding, we were saying, oh, Laurie's doing really well, and that's name recognition. And in fact, Kelly Padden has just jumped into the lead by 0.5 percentage point as more polls are coming in. And Jason Lum is pulling up into a more competitive position. Both Kelly and Laurie are sitting at 32%, and Jason's at 24%. So that's a little closer. And John Martin is inching closer to Dan Coulter in the other riding. So I think our early thoughts that okay, well there it is, it's all over. We can go home after a couple of polls are reported. It's going to be a long night for all of us, and it's very interesting there. I think we'll switch back if we can now to Kelly, and we'll just be able then to say thanks so much to Kelly. Kelly, just your closing thoughts on what you're seeing in these results, both from a provincial perspective and local perspective.
From a provincial perspective, seeing the NDP now with 50 and the Liberals at 32, that's pretty much what I had predicted. I think it's going to continue that way throughout the evening. Locally, like I said, I'm a little bit surprised in the Chilliwack Kent, but I think it's early on yet, and I think it's really going to be a battle between Kelly and Jason. And in the Chilliwack riding, I'm still holding on to the fact that I think that Dan Coulter is going to take this riding. I think that Diane really split that vote on John Martin this time around. So I'll hold on to those predictions, and that's where I'm sitting.
Well, it's interesting. The last poll that was published just before the election said the NDP would be at about 48 to 50% of the vote, the Liberals at about 33%, and the Greens at about 14%. So here we are with those numbers looking pretty accurate at this point in time. Watching the Greens bump between 3 and 4 seats will make their presence in the legislature. I'm just going to look over and glance to my friend John, who's still in the studio. What's the threshold for getting party status in the legislature? I think it's two seats. So if the Greens maintain that, they'll have party status, which is really important because, of course, you would then have access to significant resources to do your research and to make sure you're making compelling arguments in the House and doing all of those things. So we'll sit here and watch those numbers, and those are really important numbers. Kelly, thanks so much for taking some time with us this evening. It's been a pleasure to have you here. Anything that, any final questions of Kelly you wanted to get an answer for?
No, thank you very much, Kelly. Great to have you with us tonight, and like you, we'll be watching patiently and excitedly.
Yes, it's going to be a great evening as we sit here. It's exciting to kind of watch these numbers change back and forth. You're welcome to stay, Kelly, and enjoy some of the evening here with us. You may have parties to go to. I don't know at this point in time.
We may all be back here in a little while if we've got 2 elections coming back up, if Dan and Jason do get in. So we'll have some by-elections to cover.
That's absolutely true. We'll be back here for by-election Chilliwack as a school board seat and potentially a city council seat are up for grabs. It's been an exciting evening so far, and we're hardly even into it. So once again, thanks so much, Kelly. And at the top of the hour, as normal, we're going to thank our sponsors a little bit, and then we're going to come back with Don Lane, and he's going to provide a bigger update on what's happening in our riding and what's happening around the province. So stay tuned to chillTV. Thanks so much again for watching.
Wasting away, watching clouds float by my window. I wait for the day, but it never seems to come. Tracing away the path that I keep inside me. Only one way.
And welcome to election night coverage on chillTV. I'm chillTV News Director Don Lane, and the numbers are now starting to roll in a little more fast and furious. When it comes to the riding of Chilliwack, 18 of 82 reporting now, And the Dan Coulter of the NDP with about 34% of the vote. John Martin at around 29%. Diane Jansen with about 19%. But again, that is 18 of 82 polls being reported. Chilliwack, Kent, welcome to the horse race. And this could be changing as I'm reading it. But Kelly Padden of the NDP with 32%. Laurie Thronis, the independent, with 31%. Jason Lum with 25%. Also, just down the highway, keeping an eye on a couple of other ridings, Abbotsford Mission and Simon Gibson of the Liberals with 39% of the vote. And Pam Alexis, the mayor of Mission, with 36% of the vote. She is running for the NDP. Bruce Bandman of the BC Liberals, way ahead in Abbotsford South, with 44% of the vote. And with Abbotsford West, 48% of the vote, and that's Michael de Jong. Now, overall, and again, this is leading and or elected. So the magic number is 44 to be elected, but leading or elected, the NDP with 49 seats. Popular vote of about 45% there. 35% popular vote for the Liberals with 32 seats, again, leading or elected. The Greens with 4, and as John Less just mentioned, if that holds on, the Greens can continue with their party status. So things are now getting very tight with Chilliwack, Kent. You're watching election coverage on chillTV with your anchors, and that is Bud Mercer and Clint Hames.
Thanks, Don, very much. Those updates are coming in now fast and furious. We're trying to follow live on monitors as well, and we'll update you as things go on, and they seem to be changing pretty quickly. But before we do that, I want to welcome our next guest. Willow Reichelt is here. Willow is a member of Chilliwack School Board, and I don't think she'd mind if I said she's an unabashed supporter of the NDP.
That's true.
She is certainly her social media presence is urging support for her colleague Dan Coulter on the school board. Welcome, Willow.
Hi.
Nice to have you with us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So I want to start by your thoughts on this very interesting couple of ridings race.
Yeah, I mean, obviously going in, I was hopeful for an NDP win in both ridings. I really thought that would be a tough go, so I'm surprised to see actually how close it is. I'm hoping it holds the way it is now, because that would be great. But yeah, so I'm really happy to see the early results. It's very early in the night though, so I don't want to get my hopes up yet.
Well, Kelly, you've been involved now in education on the school board for a number of years and providing leadership in our community in that way. What are things that are important to a Chilliwack school board member with respect to the outcome of this election?
Well, honestly, on the school board, the big thing is I really, really did want an NDP government. I don't know if everyone knows, but I was a teacher during the Liberal reign, and they basically destroyed education. So I'm very, very committed to never having a Liberal government again if possible. And provincially, I definitely want the NDP to win. Obviously, to have MLAs from Chilliwack who are a part of the majority government would be even better. So I'm hopeful that we'll get at least one.
So what are the issues? Is it simply a funding issue that you speak of when you say there were challenges with the Liberal government?
Well, they slashed the teacher contract, which meant class sizes went through the roof. They underfunded education consistently for the entire 16 years. We had a whole generation of students who were deprived of a properly funded education, including my own 2 children. So, and I actually quit teaching because I couldn't adequately support my students in underfunded and under-resourced classrooms that didn't have enough support. So, yeah, I'm very, very committed to not having the Liberals get back in, so I'm super excited to see that it's going to be an NDP majority.
And have they made in their platform commitments to education that you think are going to be helpful?
I mean, we've already seen in Chilliwack more schools built under an NDP government without having MLAs locally than we did when we had 2 members of the majority Liberal government, even some of whom were MLAs, in the cabinet. So I think that this government has shown that they care about people regardless of whether their riding is representing their government. So I'm really excited. I'm glad. Obviously there were some things I think all of us involved in education were hoping for even more from the NDP possibly, but it definitely has made a difference over the last 3 years.
So over to you, Bud. From a city council, school board perspective, what questions are on your mind?
Well, good evening, Willow, and thanks for joining us. I know you know Dan better than most of us, or maybe all of us. And I'm wondering if you give us a little bit of the inside scoop. Give us a little bit of your own personal knowledge about what Dan, if elected, would bring to the table. Aside from obviously chairing the school board, but what personal qualities does he bring to the table?
He's very knowledgeable about issues, a wide range of issues. He does work for the NDP, so he knows a lot about all the different portfolios. Obviously, he'll be a great asset to have. If he does become the MLA, he knows a lot about education, so he's going to be a great advocate for our local schools. He's a fantastic person. I really, really like Dan. We got along great, so I think he's just a fantastic person. He has really good values. He's managed to make our school board function as well as it possibly can given its makeup, and I think that's really says a lot about Dan. Obviously it's been raucous, but he has managed to hold it together, and I think that's a lot of people wouldn't have been able to do that. So.
Okay, thank you. And when we look at Chilliwack Kent, and regardless of the numbers we've heard, in the last 10 or 15 minutes about how they're doing, which of these candidates, we've heard you talk about schooling, which obviously is, the top 1, 2 on the priority list. When you look at the candidates for Chilliwack Kent, what comes to mind as some of the strong positions that the candidates are taking? How do you rank order them?
Well, honestly, Chilliwack Kent is an interesting riding. I'm an NDP supporter. I did vote for Kelly Padden, but Jason Lum is a wonderful person, and I voted for him for city council. I would love to see him be mayor one day. If he does manage to win, I think we'll have an excellent MLA. I personally think that independents don't necessarily have as much power in the government, so I tend to vote along party lines, but honestly, Jason's fantastic. So I would be very happy with either of those people. You may know that I actually signed a letter asking Andrew Wilkinson to remove Laurie Thronis as the candidate for Chilliwack Kent for the Liberals. Laurie Thronis's values are not in keeping with modern society, and I'm glad that he was finally removed from the Liberal Party, but it will be embarrassing to Chilliwack if he wins as an independent, so I'm really hoping that either Kelly or Jason takes it.
Thank you.
So from your perspective, take off your school district hat, take off, as difficult as it is for any of us, to take off our political hats. What do you think are the real issues that are facing Chilliwack at this point in time from a provincial perspective, and your hopes for what this government may provide?
Yeah, well, I think that we need to continue actually caring about the environment. I know that obviously some of my green friends think that the NDP hasn't gone quite far enough in that regard, but I think that the NDP has a good environmental policy. We need to continue funding healthcare. We need to fund senior care. We need to have childcare, which we haven't made as many gains as we wanted, but we're on the way to eventually having $10 a day childcare, which I think will make a huge difference, particularly for women, but obviously not only women. It's very hard to go back into the workforce after having a baby if you can't find a place to put your child. So that's really important. Education, as I said, is also important. We do need more infrastructure, including public transit, and I would love to see a better way to get into Vancouver without having to get in my car, and I think that we have more of a chance with that for sure with the NDP than we would have with the Liberals. So yeah, I think all of those things are very important.
One of the things that really concerns me, and I asked all the candidates that I had an opportunity to interview, was that both the Liberals and the NDP had aggressive plans to spend money on infrastructure, and less than clear vision about how we deal with that in the future in terms of the spending. Both the Liberals and the New Democrats were talking about huge deficits and large debts as we move forward. I've heard the Liberals talked about a 5-year plan to balance the budget. I haven't heard from the NDP what the economic plan is after we spend this money, which most of us would agree is probably necessary. what's the NDP's plan for bringing the economy back to a place where we're not in that much debt?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because obviously right-wing parties always claim to be the ones who do better with the economy, but the NDP actually did have a balanced budget before the pandemic hit, so I think that it's not going to be a balanced budget for the first little while, regardless of what party gets in. But I think that if any party is going to balance it without slashing and burning social programs, it would be the NDP versus the Liberals. The Liberal plan to bring in a PST cut during a pandemic was so ridiculous to me. I laughed when I saw it, because who does that? Who cuts taxes during a pandemic? We're already have a decrease in revenue. To cut that huge amount out of our revenue stream, you couldn't do that without cutting health and education. So I'm relieved that that's not going to happen.
One of the NDP had a fairly aggressive infrastructure spending plan, as well as the Liberals, as it seemed like that was on the table. One of the things that I've found frustrating as living in our community is that those infrastructure spending plans rarely go past Abbotsford. And we have a plan to widen the highway, but only to Abbotsford. We have huge investments in things like the University of the Fraser Valley in Abbotsford, but we're not seeing that same investment in Chilliwack. Is there hope that having a member of a government that, as you say, pays attention to those kinds of things, education like university education and others, is there hope that that money is going to come to Chilliwack? I
mean, I think that there's a much better chance if Dan, for example, does win his riding. I think it's a much better chance that those things will happen. I think sometimes if you live in the city, you don't really realize that, like, Chilliwack to Vancouver is all one continuous thing, really. It doesn't stop at Abbotsford, it stops at Chilliwack. That's the end of the Fraser Valley, right? So, I mean, if we're going to widen the highway, to not do it all the way to Chilliwack seems pretty silly, because we'll just have a bottleneck getting to Abbotsford like we do getting at Abbotsford right now. I think that sometimes people forget about Chilliwack. So it would be nice if we have someone there advocating for us, which, to be fair, I think that Jason Lum would do very well as well if he wins the Chilliwack-Kent riding.
I think Jason pointed out that of the spending plans, and I believe the NDP spending plan was some around $8 or $9 billion in infrastructure. If I may be wrong, but it was a significant amount of money. But Jason pointed out that if that's the case, then about $800 million should be coming to Chilliwack, based on our population, based on an even distribution of that money around the province, and yet there wasn't anything that seems to be in that budget. I know in Kent they need recreation facilities. They don't have the population to support it, but they sure need them. Cultus Lake, they need sewage treatment plants. There's all kinds of things that were identified, but it doesn't appear like anybody was paying attention to those kind of things. So I'm hopeful that perhaps if we have members from these ridings that are friendlier with the government, maybe we can see those things happen. But anything from you?
Yeah, I'd like to go back a little bit to the environment, and perhaps, as you know, Willow, I seem to be the champion on council here, yelling and screaming every week about single-use plastics and the like. And I haven't had a lot of support from the NDP government when it comes to the environmental issues, such as plastic bags, plastic knives, plastic straws, plastic cups, single-use coffee cups, and shopping bags. The list could go on and on. I haven't had much luck with the NDP, and I'm wondering if you were giving me advice on how to deal with the NDP government should they be elected. What should I be doing different than I'm doing now?
That's a good question, but I'm not sure. I know that federally, I believe a bill was introduced to eliminate single-use plastic, so that'll go a long way to getting that done, because that'll supersede the provincial policy, I assume. I don't know. I mean, I think that if you have local candidates who really think that the environment is important, I think that would help, right? If your local MLAs are not necessarily from a party who's as keen on those types of issues, they're not going to be advocating for you in Victoria. So I think you might face a different audience coming up after this election.
Thank you.
I'm going to, it's a little early, but I'm going to just get our folks here to arranged to have Scott come back in a couple of minutes here. Just going to give a brief update. It looks like we're sitting about the same numbers as we have for quite some time. The NDP with 51 seats now, Liberals 32, and Green with 3. And that seems to be consistent throughout the night, so those numbers aren't changing all that much as we go forward. In the riding, the Chilliwack-Kent riding, Kelly Padden and Laurie Thronis are polling neck and neck. Not far behind is Jason, a few percentage points behind that. And in the Chilliwack riding, we have Dan Coulter still leading by a small amount, John Martin and Diane Jansen polling around 20%. So we don't see too much change in the overall number in the province, and we're sitting very, very tightly in Chilliwack, and I'm expecting we're all going to be sitting close to the TVs for quite some time tonight. So I'm just hang in there, Willow. I'm just going to get Scott back to get his take on where things are going and see if he's got anything new to add. Or welcome back, Scott. See if we can hear you this time.
Can you hear me?
No, I haven't got his vocal on there, but it sounds like he can hear me. So I'll just prepare you with a long-winded question, and then by the time I finish my question, they'll have your audio back. We're looking at as predicted provincially, and as I opened with, I said I think we know the outcome provincially, but locally we're not going to know for quite some time here. We are seeing a fair number of polls that are reporting, so these results seem to be pretty accurate. I don't think we're going to wait for weeks to find out who won the election overall. We may see some local moving and changing in these results. Any surprises for you, Scott, at this point in time?
Well, historically, I think we're going to be surprised that it looks like NDP candidates are competitive in both Chilliwack.
I think. Sorry, Scott, to interrupt. I think we're still having trouble with your audio. So we're showing now just to hold on. We're showing now the NDP leading or elected in 53 seats. So I think there's a few Chilliwack-like seats out there that seem to be flipping back and forth between Liberals and the NDP. Sorry, Scott, we're going to fix that problem and get back to you. I'm going to go back to Willow now. Sorry to be jumping around like that, but I'm going to go back to Willow and say, Willow, really appreciate you spending some time with us this evening. I'm trying to get a sense. In the school board, you could be facing a by-election.
Yeah, we could be. So the interesting thing is that technically Dan can do both. There's no law to prevent him from being the MLA and a school board trustee at the same time. The only thing he couldn't do is be a cabinet minister. But practically, I'm not sure how anyone could possibly do both things, but likely on our school board, given the current issues we have on our school board, it would not be he probably wouldn't resign like the day after the election, because it would need to be, we'd need to do it in a way that wouldn't lead to chaos. So, but I don't know what'll happen. I'm assuming he wouldn't do both, because that would be 2 very tiring years, I think, trying to do both things. But technically, it's not against the rules, though. No one really does that. So
yeah, there's not much precedent for that.
For sure. So I'm assuming we will have a by-election. It just might not be like November or December. It might be more like the spring or the summer.
Yeah, and there is potential, I guess, for there could be a city by-election as well.
Yeah, if Jason Lum wins, there could be a city one.
That will not be unlike the United States Supreme Court, where you have somebody step down and there's a potential for the balance on the school board. As we all know, there seems to be a number of 4-3 votes on the school board.
Yeah.
And we could see that balance interrupted, which would be an interesting dynamic.
I have a question for you. Can I ask, do we know what percentage of the vote was done by mail-in ballot in general? Because I heard that mail-in ballots were likely, younger people were more likely to mail in, and if that's the case, then that makes a difference to how we think that would change the results.
Yeah, I don't know what, I think John Less had mentioned earlier that there were 500,000 mail-in ballots. So that's a huge number of mail-in ballots. It likely won't impact the races that aren't close, and it likely won't impact the overall race. But certainly in ridings like Chilliwack-Kent and Chilliwack, it's likely those ridings are going to make a difference. I'm just waiting for a nod from the floor director. It looks like we've got Scott back on. I got a message from somebody watching saying they can hear Scott just fine. It's just us that can't hear him, but I got to know what he's saying. So, so there's Scott. Welcome back. I'm delighted you're back, and thanks for putting up with our fumbling here on the audio. It looks like things are as predicted. In fact, there's the NDP's pulling away. Any surprises for you, Scott? Are you watching anything that's giving you a bit of pause?
Well, as I tried to note before, the vote splitting in Chilliwack, which creates the possibility of two NDP candidates winning, even the possibility is not to be historic. But again, it really does depend on the blow of the local squabbles have split the votes enough to put the NDP at least in very competitive positions. It certainly looks like the general popularity, and we can't underestimate the advantage it gives incumbent governments. Right? Look at the Conservative government in Ontario, the federal Liberals, the BC NDP. You're in a position that, as many people have noted, candidates can't get out. The issue is really going to be the handling of the epidemic, and you're perceived to be doing relatively or reasonably well with that, as BC and Bonnie Henry and the NDP government is. It gives you just a tremendous advantage. I think it's pretty hard for us to guess about the impact, how the votes will be distributed in the mail-in ballots. Generally, you can kind of guess they're going to be more or less reflect what the other indicators have been. Yeah, the other thing we just might throw into this discussion, both in the United States and in Canada, the federal system is such that COVID creates really huge new expenses set against declining revenues because of the pandemic. So the politics that unfold, and part of the question to where the province is going to get the money, is going to rely on the transfer of money from the central government to essentially the provincial governments here, and similarly actually in the United States. And that's going to be the politics that's going to follow this pandemic. The provinces cannot print their own money. The federal government can. And whether they're embracing modern modern monetary theory or not, which I hope they are, in any event, provinces cannot be in a position, and the municipalities as part of those provinces, be just hung out to dry with these expenses. They're going to have to rely on federal governments who are going to engage seriously in transfers and let that federal government take on the brunt of that imbalance.
And it seems like that's going to happen around the world. That's not a problem that's localized, but it seems to me that countries like Canada that have managed the pandemic reasonably well on a scale of all of the countries out there are going to be in a better position to recover than countries that are really still struggling with the pandemic. And so our neighbors to the south, despite all the brave talk, I think are going to be in this struggle, the economic struggle that follows, somewhat longer than we are. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, absolutely. But let's don't get off on how happy we all are we live in Canada.
Well, and how happy we are to live in British Columbia, because to give credit, the government and what the government did well was it said, we're going to listen to the people who know how to deal with this. Whether the government handled it well or not is not the question. The question that is, did they listen to the science in British Columbia? They certainly have listened to the people who should be leading this, and I think we've benefited from that. And in fact, that's the case across Canada. Most governments, I think everybody would agree, I'm talking Ontario politics now, but I think most people would agree that that Doug Ford was, at first everyone thought, uh-oh, how's this going to go over? And he's been a leader in terms of dealing with a pandemic in his province, despite his politics, which might indicate that he wouldn't be. So I think the country as a whole has managed that pretty well, and hopefully that means we can manage our way out of it pretty well. I see we're coming up to the bottom of the hour, so if we can switch back to Willow, I'd like to just say our farewell to Willow and thanks. At that point in time, Scott's going to stay with us, and we're going to bring him back in the next half hour and chat through some of the results we see coming through there. So Willow, if you're there, as you are, thanks so much for taking some time out. Your insight is always appreciated, and it's really nice to have thoughts coming from every side of this political spectrum that we call British Columbia. I think it helps people be informed, and certainly you've provided some of that insight. Good luck with the school board.
Thank you so much.
There's a part of me that says, gee, I hope Dan doesn't win because he's a good school board chair, and we like him on we like the work that he's doing in that regard. But if he is successful, we know that you'll be looking into the community to find somebody to replace him, and that should be fun too. We'll be back to cover that. So Willow, all the best on the school board and continued success in your life.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Willow.
So now we're at the bottom of the hour at 9:30. So we're going to take a quick break to say thanks again to our sponsors, and then we'll be back with the golden tones of Don Lane giving us his update after that, and then Bud and I will be back.
And welcome back to Election Night on chillTV and our coverage. And chillTV is calling it, we have an NDP majority government. John Horgan has already won his seat. Sonia Furstenau of the Greens has won hers. We're still keeping an eye on the numbers for Andrew Wilkinson. He was leading his seat in Vancouver-Quilchena. The magic number is 44 to win a majority government. Right now, leading or elected for the NDP, 54, 10 over. The Liberals with 30 and the Greens with 3. Now, getting to the local ridings. This is with almost half, 40 out of 82 ballot boxes or riding polls counted. And Dan Coulter in Chilliwack with the NDP leading with 35% of the vote. John Martin with just under 31, so about 30.4. And then Diane Jansen with 19%. Now with Chilliwack Kent, it's 35 out of 89 polls reporting. And we're just doing a quick update. Kelly Patton of the NDP leading with 31, almost 32% of the vote there. This is where it's now interesting. Laurie Thronis with 28.7%. Jason Lum with 27.7%. So there we are. And again, chillTV is calling it. We have an NDP majority government. John Horgan will go back to Victoria as Premier of the province of British Columbia. And we're back to our panel, and that is Bud and Clint. Gentlemen?
Thanks so much, Don. Thanks for the update. We're going to be joined in this section again by John Less. He's agreed to do another session with us, and we're delighted about that. I had some folks call in who say they're following along on websites and they're following along on television, and that Laurie Thronis is still showing up as Laurie Thronis Liberal, as if that is a Liberal seat. And in fact, I think that's just the networks not being up to date on that. They probably had their graphics done, who knows, but it doesn't mean anything other than Laurie Thronis is showing up on TV as a Liberal. He's not, and just letting folks know, I don't think it's anything to worry about, and there's no news that I'm aware of where he's jumped back and become a Liberal again. So I think it just shows up that way on TV. So John, we'll bring you back into this discussion and say, what are you thinking? How are you feeling about the results, and anything surprising you right now?
The provincial results don't surprise me at all. They're sort of in that ballpark that I estimated earlier. Individual results always provide some surprises on election night. I see some long-term BC Liberals that are going down to defeat. I see 1 or 2 NDP members going down to defeat. And of course, then right here in Chilliwack, the way Chilliwack Kent, for example, is shaping up, we may well not know for a month what the final result will be in that riding. When you've got, about, I think it's 20% or so of the vote that was mailed in, and I'll check that in a minute here, but that's very significant. And that, 10-20% of the vote will be, potentially very, very influential, make a big impact if the results this evening are going to remain as close as they are. So we had mail-in votes of 10%. So, a lot of votes to be counted after tonight. And if they stay as close as they are at the moment, with only, a split percentage or two between them, Chilliwack Kent won't be called tonight. Chilliwack riding, perhaps more so. Dan Coulter seems to have a bit more of a lead, and we see there the impact of Diane Jansen's candidacy. Clearly, she cannibalized John Martin's vote. So it may well be that, courtesy of that vote split, the NDP comes up the middle in that particular riding. And, if the results don't change in Chilliwack Kent, the NDP will take that riding as a result of a vote split as well.
I think you're quite right. As you're sitting in the position you're in, I'm not sure if I asked you, what do you think are the big issues if this is the way it shakes out? We have, one way or another, it appears we will have an absolute newcomer in the Chilliwack riding to provincial politics, and as you said, they're going to be struggling along to get their head above the water and get things done for this community. We may have Lori Thronis, or we may have an absolute newcomer from the other side of the riding. What are the things that you're looking at that Chilliwack needs that you think ought to be a top priority for these MLAs? I mean, yes, they represent a party and they have to work along with a party, but their main function is representing people in this community. What do you think they ought to be taking to government and saying, okay, here's my issues?
Well, as you and I and Bud know only too well, we've had huge growth in Chilliwack. That looks like it's going to continue. With that, we need more expansion of education facilities. We need more investment in the Chilliwack campus of the University of the Fraser Valley. Extremely important that our young people in the Chilliwack ridings have access to post-secondary education at home. And transportation infrastructure. Everywhere you look, traffic is, basically in gridlock, whether it's within Chilliwack itself or heading towards Vancouver out of Chilliwack. The other thing I think that needs particular attention in the Chilliwack area is we need to continue to provide land for job creation. It's always been important, but no time more so than now when people are moving to Chilliwack because housing is more affordable here. We need to ensure that they have the ability to work in Chilliwack as well. I often find myself at the Prest Road interchange about 8 o'clock in the morning or so, and there's a steady stream of traffic that at the interchange turns west on the highway, and as early as 6 o'clock in the morning you already see that stream building up and everybody's heading west to go to work. We need to keep our eye on the ball here, make sure that Chilliwack continues to be a balanced community where not only do we have residential growth, but that we have that job creation growth here in Chilliwack as well. Vitally important, I think, to maintain a balanced community where people can not only live here, but also work here and then recreate here and that kind of thing. So, a lot of attention needs to be paid to that, but also our local hospital. Frankly, when we're now somewhere around 100,000 population, we need to keep the pressure on to make sure that the government continues to invest in the Chilliwack General Hospital to provide important services like maternity, for example, that a growing community needs. These services have always been provided in Chilliwack, and we need to keep up.
It is, and I know you share this, and Bud may be growing in his concern about this, is that we do seem to lose a little bit by being just a little smaller than Abbotsford, which tends to, have the big hospital, the centralized hospital. One of the concerns I have moving forward, and I'm sure you share this, and I'll bet Bud does as well, is our court services in Chilliwack. We've long been home to a Supreme Court seat in Chilliwack, as well as our provincial court, and I understand there are new court facilities being built in Abbotsford, and I'm not sure what the future is of our Supreme Court in Chilliwack.
Well, it would be absolutely tragic if we were to lose that Supreme Court seat here in Chilliwack. If we do elect an NDP member tonight, I would think that new member, in this case Dan Coulter, would find that very much on the top of his list of things to address with the Attorney General, who I expect would still be David Eby. This Supreme Court seat in Chilliwack has been there since the late 1800s. It's I don't see any rationale for taking it away. I know that in Abbotsford they're building new court facilities, and good for them. They need them there too, but in no way should that be at the expense of the facilities in Chilliwack.
Bud, questions?
Yeah, it's catastrophic even to, and I'm not an alarmist by nature or genetics, but if we were to move our Supreme Court to Abbotsford, if you think about just the cost and the toll to the city and the amount of time police officers spend in court, we'll just see a lineup of our cars heading westbound every morning and then every day after lunch for the afternoon sitting, with all our officers traveling to Abbotsford for court, and nothing could be worse. But back to the judicial system, I recently completed a review as part of the mayor's task force for community safety here in Chilliwack. And one of the things that struck me is, and I keep, and I guess it's a good thing and a bad thing in a way, that I can continue to go back to my time. And I look at what the police are doing now in Chilliwack, and it's a different police force than I ran. The city is more violent. We're seeing more weapons than I ever did in my time here in Chilliwack. Yet we don't seem to have increased the number of Crown prosecutors. So that sounds like a pretty simple statement, but when you peel away that onion, what that pretty much means is that a good many of good police files and good investigations actually don't get to court because we don't have the court time and we don't have the right number of prosecutors to prosecute them. And it's a compounding problem. So I would agree with John that this has to be a priority, whichever government our MLA is aligned with. It has to be a priority for Chilliwack and for the health of Chilliwack.
Well, I think if we do have members from here, especially someone like Dan who looks like he's prepared to become elected, that'll bode well. I think the NDP government will probably want to continue to have services in Chilliwack rather than see them move to other ridings. So I'm very hopeful about that. John, can we take just a second to talk about, we briefly touched on the future of the BC Liberal Party as we move forward. I'm reminded, and I know it's not the same, but I'm reminded of I think it was 1991 when, I'm just checking my notes here, 1991 when
The Socred implosion?
Yeah, when, of course, everybody remembers Bill Vander Zalm, and there was some indiscretions around the selling of his fantasy gardens, and he resigned, and there was quite a battle in the Liberal Party at that time, as I recall. Grace McCarthy leading a kind of old-style Socreds, and Rita Johnson sort of representing more the Vander Zalm-style social conservative as opposed to kind of the big tent Grace McCarthy Socreds, and it of course there was almost open warfare at that point in time, and then there was the Socred implosion. We're not seeing a liberal implosion here tonight, but I am feeling the Liberal Party. There's a more social wing of the party, and there's a more, I don't even know what you might call it, an urban, I don't want to say progressive because that's leading in the wrong direction. But do you sense that there's a split in the party and that this might be, there may be a breaking off of some people to go more towards a legitimate or true conservative party?
Well, if there isn't a split, there is certainly tension. And we've seen that play out over the last little while. The BC Liberal Party has always seen itself, I think, as sort of somewhat of a big tent, everything from center left to right. And, they all coexisted fairly peacefully for a long time. That seems to be coming apart. And the other thing that we're seeing is ridings that heretofore had been very safe BC Liberal ridings are going NDP or something else tonight. The Langleys, for example, if you look at them, it looks like Mary Polak, for example, is in trouble. In Chilliwack here, you see John Martin in trouble. Now, there might be a little bit of a different background behind that, but in the case of Laurie Thrones, it was that tension in terms of some of the social conservative values that he holds that led to that rupture, and he's on the ballot now as an independent, or at least stated that he'll be sitting as an independent if elected. So there are those tensions, absolutely. It will take a leader of some skill, I would suggest, to heal some of those tensions and to bring people back together. In the history of the party that I was quite familiar with Gordon Campbell and after him Christy Clark, those tensions were were dealt with, and everybody felt comfortable, relatively so. But they have been allowed to fester in the last number of years. They've got to get that back together, otherwise they could well split off the conservative vote into something else. And that's not where they want to go, I think. You want a free enterprise party in British Columbia that represents a fairly broad tent. That was the case through all of the Socred years and through the BC Liberal years. And any other recipe is one for disaster, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like politics change as much in BC. It's how big can one party make their tent, and certainly in the case of the Liberals this time, it feels like that tent has shrunk a little bit. So it will be interesting. I tend to agree with you. I think it's about leadership. I think Andrew Wilkinson, and I've met Andrew Wilkinson, and he is, as you said, he's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and he certainly knows his stuff, but he hasn't got that quality that brings people to him. He certainly can develop policy and he can write speeches, but he's not bringing people to him, and that tent isn't big enough. So I'm guessing we'll be seeing a leadership review of some kind in the coming time.
And it might need to be somebody new, somebody who's not even been elected tonight. There's I think it needs a considerable revamp to put the party on a footing that will position them, down the road, 3-4 years down the road, to be competitive again. But they've got to sort themselves out, and there will be, some new people elected tonight, and hopefully that can help start that process.
Certainly that's the history. Both Christy Clark and Gordon Campbell came from outside the party to become the leader. In some cases, I think in Christy's case, she didn't really even have much support within the party, but got the leadership anyway and was able to keep that coalition together. Bud, your thoughts on where we're headed?
Yeah, just a question for John. John, I can see from where you're sitting, you're probably not privy to this, but Laurie Thronis has pulled just slightly ahead of Kelly Padden in Chilliwack, Kent. And Dan Coulter remains ahead, and Diane Jansen is lagging some distance behind. Is any of this surprising to you? I heard some of your predictions earlier tonight, and you're pretty close. John Martin is struggling a little bit. It's still early, we all know that. But any surprises?
Not too much. Personally, I thought Laurie would be a little bit stronger than he's showing, and Jason Lum is showing a little bit more strongly than I thought he would. Earlier today, I was talking to someone, and I said, look, if Jason Lum's around 15%, then Laurie wins a fairly strong win. If Jason's up in the upper 20s, then it's going to be a dogfight, and I guess it's the latter that we're seeing. And like I said, it may be a number of weeks before we have a firm idea as to who actually the winners are in both of the Chilliwack ridings.
And I think, as I keep watching my iPad blink here, and it's almost completely due to Laurie and Kelly changing positions. It would be interesting to find out, and I don't know if we can through the back room there, to find out which polls are actually reporting.
It's probably going to be pretty hard. I know in municipal elections we're used to that, Bud, where you could track that exactly, but that would be very difficult to pull that kind of information out because there's over 100 of them. And you'd have to analyze very, very carefully as to where those polls are and what those areas look like and all of that. So I doubt we'll find out too much in that.
Yeah, regard. And I just got a head shake from the back room there that we can't do that. The reason I bring that up is in the Chilliwack Kent, Jason Lum has been canvassing heavily in the Promontory area, which of course is very highly populated. And it'd be interesting to know whether that polling station is reporting, because I think Jason will do very well there. So as we've all said over and over again, it's still early.
This is still a real horse race
Yeah.
by every measure. So I'm just going to say thanks, John, so much for sticking around and giving us a little bit more. We're going to go back to our expert one more time and see if we can get Scott back on the line. Scott, are you there? Can you hear me?
1, 2, 3, testing.
Perfect, and I can hear you, so everything's good. I did have a note when I was saying, and I apologize, when I was saying I can't hear Scott or we can't hear Scott. Apparently the audience could hear Scott, but it was only us in the studio that couldn't. And a friend sent me a text to say, Clint, that's okay, we can hear him and you never listen anyway. So I don't think that's true. But so Scott, we're getting to wrap up here wrap up the evening. We're getting close to 10 o'clock. It feels like we've decided everything we are going to decide on a provincial level, and locally it's likely, given how close some of these are, we're going to fall victim to the fact that it's going to be the mail-in ballots that's going to make a difference, certainly in one riding and maybe even in the other riding. Some closing thoughts from you on this evening and where you think things are going to end up?
Well, I think following upon what the previous discussion here, the changes that may happen in Chilliwack, specifically the election of New Democrats and their very competitive position, is a product of the way the local controversies and candidates have divided up the vote. I wish I could say, given my historical preferences, that everybody was in love with the NDP, but in fact they were arguing over who they were going to vote for instead. That's not to take anything away from the candidates there or the job they've done, but it is politics where you don't need 50% of the vote. It's first past the post. And the more horses that are running, right? You don't need the same percentages to be first past the post. That would be my comment on the Chilliwack ridings. The Abbotsford ridings are seen to be voting very, very traditionally. Except Abbotsford Mission is looking interesting, although I haven't looked at it in the last 10 minutes or so. But arguably, the Liberal candidate, Ruth Brandman, who was not a very popular mayor and was not elected mayor in the last election, a lot of people thought that the Liberals should have come with a stronger candidate, but I see he's holding on the way the Conservative candidates in Abbotsford tend to hold on regardless. So.
I think John's comments resonate there in that there are people in this election where, because it was a snap election, they had trouble. I think Liberals had trouble finding candidates, and Bruce was, as you say, he wasn't the most popular mayor. Survived one term and was unelected, but I don't recall in many places where there was very competitive nomination meetings, so you didn't see a whole lot of people wanting to get involved this time, so that maybe has something else to do with it. Your comments about the Chilliwack ridings, I think are bang on. We're not seeing a big breakthrough in the percentage of vote that the NDP is receiving. What we're seeing is dividing up the vote in other ways because of circumstances that have happened here. But at the same time, you never know what's going to happen in the future. Our community's getting younger, and I think our community is tending, certainly you feel that there are more progressive voices in the community, so maybe they're going to be making that kind of difference in the future.
Any of the older members of the community haven't been here their whole lives. They're downsizing from Vancouver.
That's right. That's right. So it's quite a bit different there.
It used to be.
So Bud, comments from you?
Well, it's going to be an interesting night, Clint. We're not even halfway there yet. with the number of pools that are reporting. So it's, we're seeing trends in both of the ridings, Chilliwack and Chilliwack-Kent. But anything's possible.
Yeah.
This isn't over yet.
I think at the outset of the evening, we were asking people to be prepared for the fact that we may not have outcomes when we finish tonight. We may not have final outcomes for these ridings, but we certainly have an indication that we were all correct when we said this was going to be a very, very tight race. Looks like, as we say, as Scott has said, the rest of the Fraser Valley is seeming to go the same way. Langley, it looks like there's some changes apparent in Langley. And Scott, some comments on that? Have you been following those races at all?
Well, Andrew Mercier is somebody I knew for a long time as a student, and I have he's a friend of mine. I think he's worked very, very hard there in 2 elections, and he's an extremely competent young person. I think he would be good in government and would be the kind of person with the kinds of abilities that would be good in any government.
And which riding is he in, Scott? I'm sorry, I don't have that one in front of me. Langley Center?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
That'll be interesting. Pretty typically, that's an area where the Liberals have a stronghold, and they're not doing as well this time. Thank you so much. It's been just a real pleasure, Scott, to have you on the air. I hope you found it as enjoyable as we have. I know it's probably it's certainly past my bedtime. I'm guessing it's bed's going to look pretty good tonight as we move forward. It's been just a really enjoyable evening for us. I think we're gonna take a bit of a break here. We're gonna come back to Dawn, who's going to give us another update, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes to wrap up this evening and give some final details. So again, let me take this chance to say, Scott, just been an absolute pleasure to see you again. Thanks so much for participating this evening, and we'll probably be glued to our TVs for the rest of the night, just like I'm sure you are as well. Take care, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
So we'll take a break now, and we'll be back with Dawn with some comments.
It's Bruce on the loose. Come on, let's go check one out today. There it is. We have the location for the Olive Junction right on the corner of Keith Wilson and Better Road in Garrison Village. Let's go! All right, we've arrived at the Olive Junction. Here we are in lovely Garrison. Come on in, let's see what's in here. I mean, look at the selection in here. It's like incredible. Look at all these vinegars and oils. It's like, wow, I am overwhelmed at this. Samantha and Curtis, tell us why you do this and how long have you been here? Give us a little bit of your story.
Well, we've been in Garrison Village since December 2018, but this journey actually began about 10 years ago to a trip that I made down in Fairfield, Bellingham. And that was my first oil and vinegar experience. And it just catapulted us into what is possible with food and what's possible with oil and vinegar.
You're not just oils, you're not just vinegars. Tell me more. What's going on here?
We actually have our own artisan foods line, and it's our own private label. So a lot of this stuff is actually small batch, local harvest.
I did see on the counter espresso flavored balsamic vinegar. Wow! Like, what? Can I get a buzz off that?
I think you can, actually, yes. No, it's a great balsamic vinegar. My wife actually uses it in chili. It's great from cheesecake to chili.
Yeah, so actually because it's seasonal, I figured we'd hook you up with one of our top sellers right now, which is our toasted coconut balsamic vinegar, and paired it with our California lime olive oil. So we've put the lime in the coconut for you.
Let's see. Wow. Wow. This is good.
Yes.
Wow. It's like drinking concentrated wine, only, with coconuts in it.
Yeah, there's no alcohol.
Here we go with the olive oil. This is fantastic. It's like, who knew you could get the variety of this stuff put into a tiny little bit of olive oil, Thank you, Curtis and Samantha. This was awesome. hey, when you're out shopping and you've got an amazing meat or fish or whatever, this is the place. Once you've got your food in hand, come down here and ask them questions. You never know where he's going to show up next.
Wasting away, watching clouds float by my window. I wait for the day, but it never seems to come. Tracing away a map that I keep inside me. Only one way.
Good evening and welcome to election coverage as we continue on chillTV. I'm chillTV's news director, Don Lane. It's been an interesting night and it is far from over. The only thing we know for sure is that we have a majority NDP government that is going back to Victoria. 55 seats leading or elected for the BC NDP. They needed 44. That was the magic number to have a majority. 29 for the Liberals, 3 for the Greens. When it comes to Chilliwack and Chilliwack-Kent, they're going to be counting to the wee hours of the morning. For the riding of Chilliwack, 54 of 82 polling stations now reporting, and Dan Coulter with 34.6% of the vote. He is well ahead of John Martin with 30% of the vote, 20% of the vote going to Diane Jansen. Now for Chilliwack-Kent, they are going to be counting this for a long time. And again, these numbers have been flip-flopping literally every 30 seconds when we're refreshing. Laurie Thronis with 32.5% of the vote. Callie, as an independent, by the way. Now, if you're looking on Election BC's website, yes, they are still listed, or Laurie is still listed as a Liberal. And we totally understand that, but he is an independent. Callie Padden with 31.8% of the vote. And Jason Lum with just over 25% of the vote. Up the highway in Abbotsford, and looking at Simon Gibson with 38% of the vote, 38.32% of the vote, and now Pam Alexis of the NDP, Mission's mayor, this is Abbotsford Mission, with 38.7% of the vote. They're going to be counting that one for a while. Abbotsford South, Bruce Banman, pretty much a lock with 46% of the vote as a Liberal. Abbotsford West, again, pretty much a lock for Mike DeYoung with the Liberals at 47, almost 47.5%, and Preet Ray of the BC NDP at 34%. So needless to say, for those of us in Chilliwack, it ain't over until they decide it's over. And once again, back to our panel with Clint Hames and Bud Mercer.
Thanks so much, Don. It's great to have those updates. We're following along, Bud and I are following along with the election updates on our computers as we can, and we've got little to add to what Don has said, except I might step out and be a little bit bold and say that I think the Chilliwack riding, I think that one is done. In my impression, that lead, although small, has been holding throughout the night. I don't see any reason why that's going to change dramatically. I think it looks like Dan Coulter is going to be the MLA in that region. I'll be bold, but who knows? The Chilliwack-Kent riding is just way too close to call, and again, I think that's going to be the mail-in ballots that decides that one. So we're gonna do a wrap up here. I'm gonna throw over to John Less, who's stayed with us tonight, and it's been great to have you, John. Some final thoughts from you on where we're at and where you see the future.
Well, with tonight's results across the province, I think we've seen the BC Liberals hold their ground in rural BC, in the north, and in the Okanagan. But man, things are sure changing in the Fraser Valley. That always has been safe, free enterprise territory, and we're seeing ridings in Langley and now Abbotsford Mission, for example, in looking like they might go NDP. So that I think locally is a real story. There, change is afoot. Our communities are changing. I mean, you look around, lots of growth, lots of urbanization, and I think we're seeing that reflected in the polls. The Chilliwack of today is not the Chilliwack of 25, 30 years ago, Clint, when you and I were heavily involved. The community is changing. So you look at Langley, it's the same thing. When Mary Polak goes down, when Rich Coleman's riding looks like it might go NDP. Marvin Hunt, I saw some numbers earlier that he might be going down as well. So the whole stretch of territory right through the Fraser Valley is changing, and all of the political parties need to reflect on that. And but overall, the numbers, NDP right now showing 55 seats. That's no surprise, I don't think, to those of us who are kind of prognosticating. They'll have a comfortable majority government. They'll be able to implement their program. It's good to see the Greens maintaining their 3 seats. I know Sonia Furstenau has maintained her seat as well. I think she did a creditable job as the leader of the Green Party of about 3 weeks standing when the election was called. She did extremely well in the provincial debate between herself, Wilkinson, and Horgan, and I think she was rewarded tonight. That party could have been in danger of being wiped off the map in these circumstances, but she held her own, and she'll live to see another day. Another riding that seems to be changing is West Vancouver Sea to Sky, where a Green candidate is in the lead there. That is not that much of a surprise, but yet it is the first time that a Green candidate is winning that riding. So some shifting around all over the place, but rural BC and the Okanagan, the Kootenays, very much BC Liberal territory, and they're losing some of their ground in the Fraser Valley.
It'll be an interesting Parliament as it opens, and as we work through the sort of post-pandemic world. We're all hoping we'll be in a post-pandemic world very soon. Be interesting times as we move forward. Bud, some closing thoughts from you.
Yeah, thank you, Clint. I agree with you in the Chilliwack riding. I think I would go out on a limb and say that Dan Coulter will probably close the night. As for Chilliwack-Kent, as I watch the iPad blink, and the reason why it blinks is the number 1 and 2 positions keep changing, and now Laurie's back in the lead here for a minute or two, I guess. Still very close between the top 3, about 7%. So that's not over, and as has been said many times tonight, it seems to be so close that we may not even get a winner or a loser here in the next 24 hours. This could go on for a while as the ballots are counted. I think it'll be too close. Thank you to chillTV. for having us. And thank you to Clint for inviting me to join you here tonight. This is not something that I routinely do, but I very much enjoyed the evening. Thank you very much.
Well, let me join in and say thank you. I think it was a great evening and very enjoyable. Our guests were all very illuminating, and certainly the commentary that Scott was able to provide is a lot of fun listening to Scott. He's been around for so long, and he still pays such close attention, so thanks to him. It's been an interesting evening, and I'd like to thank our sponsors, Simpson Notaries, the Kohler Epp Wealth Management Group of RBC Dominion Securities, Earl's Kitchen and Bar, Hofstede's Country Barn, and Mark's Commercial of Chilliwack for making this evening happen. And a special thanks, as I've said, to our guests, Scott Fast, John Less, Kelly Valonis, and Willow Reichelt, for their insights. It was great to have them all here and to hear all of those perspectives. And I'd like to say a huge thanks to chillTV for having us here this evening. We enjoy this a lot. There's nothing like old politicians getting together and chewing the fat over an election. It's an awful lot of fun. Thanks to every one of you who's watching chillTV BC 2020 Election Night, presented by Simpson Notaries. On behalf of Bud, myself, and everyone at chillTV, I hope you have an enjoyable evening.
Thank you.